Trying to get going here. So I'm going to call this May 16, 2024 Board of Education meeting to order. You can all stand and pledge allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, guys. Tonight we've got a pretty special program. We've got a new award. This year the board created a new category award. The Maplewood Fire Department was nominated for the Family of the Year, but obviously that wasn't a perfect fit. The Maplewood Fire Department exemplifies the true spirit of the MRH community. Ever present, ever caring, always pulling up the red trucks with the Blue Devils emblem on the side to support the district. This is a partial list of the contributions, which include purchasing holiday gifts for our families, purchasing laptops for Joe's Place alums, and sponsoring the recent Joe's Place golf fundraiser, donating their grant for the new kindergarten playhouse, donating items such as bicycles for students whose homes have been sustained by fire damage or have sustained fire damage, supplying turkeys for weekends on wheels during holidays, arranging multiple vaccine clinics, showing up in their shiny trucks when we need them for a trunk or treat, and perhaps most importantly, training staff and students on-site in fire safety and CPR techniques. For this reason and more, the Board of Education created the first ever Above and Beyond Award, which goes to the full staff of the Maplewood Fire Department.
I am not good at this. Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, perfect. Let's get this
All right, great. We're good.
All right, thank you.
And equally as exciting, Family of the Year. The Family of the Year nomination says it all. It reads in part, the awards are a big part of the community. Most recently, Rachel helped the families who lost their belongings in a fire. She collected clothes and found hotels for them to stay in. She goes beyond the duties of her job description. The family's always been able to step up and help with the MRH Elementary School exhibits after school. We would always trust Izzy to take charge of any museum project and execute it beautifully. Most recently, Dustin organized his time to allow Abby to bring some joy to our classes with her pet rats. It is so much more than rodents. Dustin, also known as Field Trip Dad, has chaperoned field trips, coached MRO youth sports, and judged senior capstone projects. We are honored to have them tonight. So y'all will come forward.
Back out and you gotta hold it.
You may have noticed that our monthly meetings got a little bit more crowded this year with the addition of the members of the Principal Advisory Leadership Board. Better power. These student leaders are non-voting advisors to the board, serving as representatives and advocates for all levels of the student body. Their roles include providing insights and perspectives that contribute to discussions and deliberations on matters that can potentially influence the thinking of board members. The board believes that it takes a higher level of devotion and commitment for any student to step up in this capacity. And that's why we're saluting all of our PAL board members tonight with our Citizens of the Year.
Okay, you see Steve? Actually, you know,
Come on, Alex.
he was my slide advance, and he gets the whole thing.
There you go.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah.
This is gonna work right here. Very good.
And one of our members of our outdoors is here tonight. She's off playing soccer, and I don't know if it's orange yet, but I did ask, so when I find out, it's all my stuff. All right, it's now time for public forum. Just a reminder, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Don't discuss any personal, teacher or student matter, and we usually don't respond directly, digitally. I mean, we'll probably give you an answer within 24 hours, but I think actually this issue is on the agenda tonight. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Kohler to the podium.
Just pull it up. Okay. Hello and good evening, Board of Education members. My name is Sarah Kohler, and I'm a current 8th grader at MRH. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and share my perspective on the high school girls golf team proposal. I strongly believe that starting a girls golf program at MRH would positively impact our school and become a popular new sport for many people. Since we already have a boys team, interest for golf spiked this year, and we had 2 girls play on the boys team. They reported loving golf, and they have a new sport that they can play for the rest of their lives. We even held an interest meeting for girls golf next year, and we had a total of 17 girls sign up on our sign-up sheet, so there definitely is interest for this. We also already have 5 girls that are full yeses for next year and will definitely be playing, and some of them are here today. We have like Franny and Celia, for instance. And even if many girls from the interest meeting don't play next year, having a girls team could convince them to play in the following school year. Even though our 2 girl golfers this year really enjoyed practicing and playing, they were at a disadvantage when it came to their matches against other schools. Since they had to play at the boys team at MRH, they had to play for much further distances while playing against like other boys teams at their matches. For example, last year at state, girls played from 5,300 yards. The boys also had their districts at the same golf course, but they played from 6,300 yards, a 1,000-yard difference. This creates an unfair disadvantage for MRH girl golfers and does not set them up for success for college or scholarship opportunities from their tournaments. Ensuring our girl golfers have the same opportunities and resources as the boys team will allow us to create a thriving new sports program at our school. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you consider the positive benefits that a girls golf team would have on our school.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. All in favor?
We have a,
So I had a question, sorry, and I'm not as familiar with the procedure, but I did look up Robert's rules, and I had just some general questions, very brief, about the warrant list, and I think if it could lead to a discussion, you have to move it off, so I wanted to make a motion to move it onto the regular agenda, just for a very brief discussion.
Okay.
aye.
Okay, so we have an even number of people here, and I was told that we have to keep voting until we reach a consensus, or we can table the item. So to keep this meeting not 8 hours long, I think that I'm just voting aye. So we're going to move that to, I guess, is that in study
Action
items?
items.
Or action items? Okay. All right. So whoever's keeping track of that, you know what that number is when we get to it. So aside from that one change, does anybody have any other issues that they would like removed or changed to action items?
I just have some questions about the assessment presentation and document that was presented.
Okay, so do you want that, so is that something you want removed as an action item?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's a discussion or study item or something. These aren't action item. Well, I mean, I guess we do have to vote on them, but, you know,
All right,
to
so-
potentially do
Okay,
it.
so why don't we just move, okay, so which number is it that you want moved to the action item?
It's 2.06 is what he's asking.
Okay, all right, so 2.06 and 2.07 are going to be moved to action items. So aside from those two issues, can I get a motion to approve
So there's an open motion to approve the consent agenda, which,
except that it was as presented,
so I think there are some folks who are going to vote no on that, then,
Oh, okay,
right?
so, all in favor?
Doesn't appear anyone's in favor of that motion, so
Okay,
would you like to call for,
all against,
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
the motion is to approve the consent agenda
as presented?
as presented.
And so nobody's voting for that, so everybody that's against it,
Yeah.
aye.
Aye.
Okay, all right, so can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda
As amended.
as amended?
So moved.
Second.
May I have all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, study items. The first one is 3.01, construction change orders by Dr. Pikel.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I should wait for a response. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Sorry, I'm a little excited. I just got out of the scholarship banquet. My daughter also had a college signing today. If you remember, I appreciate the grace last month. I was not here at the board meeting. I was traveling to Knox, and then that culminated in a signing today. So we're very excited about that. Multiple change orders on the middle school, high school project. We'll actually talk about both projects today. We'll talk about the middle school, high school. We'll also talk about the Maria J. Langston Administrative Center. So on the middle school, high school project, we did have change order 47, providing work outside of scope. That request was $59,000, and we added $51,000 to that. We negotiated that down. Also, there's additional general conditions requested by the contractor of $76,000. We negotiated that down to $34,000 and some change. In addition, there was some work in our gymnasium that was not in conformance, but it did pass inspection. So we did get a deduct on that one, or we had received money back in the amount of $9,986. Okay. So total on that is $75,559. Moving on to the Maria J. Langston Administrative Center. We had multiple. So the first one was we had some foundation repair. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been raining lately. and we have found every leak in that building. So it's the good news, we know where they're at now. But one of those was a crack in the foundation, so that needed to be repaired with epoxy, but we had to rip off the drywall, re-insulate. There was a second one on the parking lot side where we had to remove mold and cabinets, that was $3,600 and some change. And then the big one was the revising the boardroom. Again, as a reminder, the original design, we were limited to 49 people. So this allows us to move that up to 78 people in that room. That really saves us from moving meeting. Are we going to have over 49 people? Do we need to move back down to the high school, middle school? And then the last one is just typical request for permits. And the, I'm sorry, last one is credit for concrete at the entrance on Big Bend. We're actually working with City of Maplewood. They already have some concrete work going on, so we're getting that done at a reduced rate of what the contractor was going to be charging us. And then, sorry, last one, sewer jetting. We had a lot of issues with our drains in the building, and that was $3,646. So a total budget impact of $47,687.87.
Dr.
questions?
Dietrich, an update on the timeline for getting all contractors out of Building A here?
I'm happy to jump forward. I do have that on the agenda later.
Okay,
Okay.
that's fine then.
Yes.
I won't steal that portion
Yeah,
of your.
okay, yeah.
My question might be a later one too, but it looks like, we're about almost $1.5 million over our original contracts then. Do we have an idea of around how much more we might spend over that, or are we pretty much there?
So there's a couple things in play right now. We have what I would consider a large amount of nonconformance work in two general areas. So right now we are negotiating what that looks like. So these are all items that passed building code, but maybe we just don't appreciate the aesthetics of it. We don't appreciate, so we're working right now with the contractor to negotiate what that amount is that's due back to us. So I would say there are still some funds that are going to be going out. There are still some funds that are going to be coming back to us. Chris and I have a budget spreadsheet, but it's a really fluid situation. I would hate to throw a number out, but I would say we're getting to the point where we've got a pretty good solid number, and I don't see that that's escalating very much more. The big numbers we were waiting on were those general conditions, the ones that we negotiated down. Those were the big ones that were laying out there.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome.
I have a question. So when you say non-conforming, is this something that's going to require remediation later, or is
No.
it nothing that we have to worry about?
No, if it's going to require remediation at this point or anything like that, it's going to be taken care of before we take ownership of that. So,
Any other questions?
And the building is fully in use now. I think I saw photos of kids in the gymnasium, right?
mhm.
Okay,
You'll see pictures of that later.
awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
You're up next. You've got student meal pricing by Dr.
Yeah, you know, I probably should have brought my report up. It's sitting over there. Chris or Chris, can you guys bring up that presentation for me, please? Go to the second slide. So one of the questions that was asked by the board was to make sure that we're giving an idea of what the participation rate is for free, reduced, and pay. So if you go across this, our free going down, so MRH, early childhood, I'm going to read this to you, but I do want to point out a trend that I noticed as I was looking at this. One of the trends is as you go higher up in our school system, our free and reduced lunch rate is going up. Okay, so if you look at our early childhood center, I would tend to focus over here because that combines our free and reduced lunch rate, and that tends to be that number that people are looking for when we're doing grants. So at the elementary, our early childhood, it's at 22.69%, and then it slowly climbs as you get all the way up into high school. Okay? That is important. There's a lot of people in this room who have written grants. A large number of grants that you're going to see, those thresholds are typically 40% or 50%. Are the ones that I consistently see, especially on the school safety side. If you're not rural, and if you're not 40 or 50% for your reduced lunch rate, that typically hinders on that rubric that gets you right off the bat. Okay, but these are the free and reduced lunch rates per building, if you want to take a second.
Can I ask, does Mr. Estrada know how well we did in actually getting information from families? I know this is self-reported. Did he step out? Okay. Well, when he comes back, maybe we can just check and make sure. I know the participation rate has been high, but families don't always realize why we're asking them to fill out the forms.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, in some grants, if it's building specific, sometimes you can put the FRL or free and reduced lunch rate for that specific building. So if you think about, I was looking at the high school at 39.18%. I mean, that could be one student that's potentially keeping us out of there.
Yeah.
So, okay. Next slide, please. So I was also asked, what is the participation rate per building? So if you go over to the far column here at the Early Childhood Center on a daily basis, you're looking at about 9% participating in our breakfast program at the Early Childhood Center. At the elementary school, you're at 18.21%. At the middle school, 2.69%. Okay, and at the high school, 8.9%. Okay. Next slide, please. I was also asked, lunch participation jumps up significantly. There's some conversations that I've already started with building admin saying just, hey, what does this look like? Why is there this discrepancy? Some of it may be a little bit of scheduling. I know that students go into the building at the secondary campus. They've always had some limited opportunity or time to get down there. That being said, I've lived that with teachers in that building. Our teachers are very flexible with allowing students to have those breakfasts. But if you look at those participation rates, all of them hovering around that 50% mark. So the thing that we're looking at tonight is what are our current meal prices. This is what I observed from our district. Interestingly, when I started going out and looking at other districts, one of the big discrepancies I saw was that other districts separate their lunch rates by whether it's a primary school or a secondary school. So in our case, we would have our early childhood center and our elementary school on one lunch rate, and our secondary, so middle school and high school, on a separate rate. Because the portion sizes are larger, they cost us a little bit more money to make those plates. And that was very, to be honest with you, I didn't see a school that wasn't doing it. So that was something just that I looked at as I was looking through the schools. So, which I'll give you on the next slide. So if you look at the 4 schools that I looked at Afton, Webster, Brentwood, Kirkwood. The reason for that is they are 4 schools that also did not qualify for Provision 2, meaning that they are not allowed just to give free breakfast to their students either. All 4 of these schools are also Chartwell schools, so the data was easily attainable for us. So looking at the proposed rate, let me jump to that. I'm sorry, we go back one slide because I just saw a talking point. Just as a talking point, we only set the full prices. We do not set the reduced prices. Those are set by the state. Okay, so sorry, go ahead, Chris. So we use the equity tool to set these prices. So currently the equity tool, and it's one thing, we can compare these schools, but it really still is not apples to apples because it's our own individual school data that we put in that then kicks out these numbers to us and says, hey, here's your high number, here's your low number, and then based on what you're charging this year, we recommend that, schools only go approximately 10 cents, okay? But again, those are just recommendations or suggestions from the state. So if you look at this, I tried breaking it down. The current is in the, I call seafoam blue. And then the proposed, which we'll be looking at, is to the left. And then what I did was, because most schools on average raise it around 10 cents, I can tell you that one of the schools on this list, and they have not approved it yet, so I'm not going to say who that is, they're proposing a 21-cent increase, okay? I've talked to a couple of the other schools, they're doing 10 cents. One of them is looking at a waiver because their prices are already where they need to be on the equity tool, where they do not need to raise their price, okay? So I'm kind of working from a 10-cent average per district. So that's what I'm looking at. If you look at here for the average for 24-25, that's if you give Afton, Webster, Brentwood, Kirkwood 10 cents on their lunch price, and you do the average, now this is where MRH sits up against that if we were to raise it. Okay, so if we raised our prices, which with what I'm proposing, at breakfast we would be 1 cent under the average of these 5 school districts. At lunch for the primary, so that's ECC and elementary, we would be 5 cents below the average. And then at the secondary campus, we would be 2 cents and then 30 cents below the average. And that's with us doing an additional 5% at the secondary campus. Adult, I did not propose an increase for 2 different reasons. One, for lunch, we're already over the average. And I know a big part of, we've been talking about teacher retention, we've been talking about, you know, I almost said teacher happiness, teacher morale, and I do think that's important. But I think we're already, if we raise that, we're going to be the second highest out of these 5, and I don't know what. And then for breakfast, we're 28 cents below the average, but I'm going to be honest with you, we're already making a profit on that, and our numbers are not where they, I mean, I think at the middle school, high school building, we've had 28 breakfasts served to adults, and I think it was the last 2 months. So it's not something, to me, if we're looking at making that more profitable, we need to look at raising our participation numbers before we think about raising our price on adults. And then milk is the other one. So we have been at 50%, which is a lot lower than other schools. So I'm only proposing that we raise that 10%, which will still keep us 13 cents below the average of the other districts. Good, Chris. Budget impact, what this does for the district. If we were to raise 10 cents across the board for elementary, ECC, middle school, and high school, that would be $8,627. And then the additional 5 cents would have a budget impact of $1,525. This is important because if you're looking at the equity tool, when the numbers come out of there, I believe the number was approximately $8,500 of basically when we're starting the year on day 1, we're starting $8,500 in the hole with the current lunch prices. Okay. So this would help level that out. So we did budget impact. Go ahead, Chris. So that is what the proposed meal cost would be for the next academic year. We would be looking at 10 cents for all breakfast. And again, it would be keeping the the primary and the secondary the same. But again, the reason for doing that is being thoughtful about those averages compared to the other districts, even though the serving sizes are a little bit different. And then for lunch, primary would go up 10%. Lunch for secondary would go up 15 cents, and milk would go up 10. And that was a lot of data right off the bat, so. Questions, please.
Just, I think Katie had a question first.
Oh, hi, Vince. I was wondering at the beginning, how well did we do with collecting forms for free and reduced lunch eligibility this
So I've
year?
been working hard on that the last couple of years just to fill in with the transition to Chartwells. Last year we collected about 65% of the applications. This year we collected 82%. So a significant increase.
Great, thank you to you.
Actually, we more easily met our kind of goal in terms of how eligibility as well.
Thank you.
So, when we're doing this pricing in the 10,000, are our Chartwell prices set for next year yet? So I assume it's based on what we spend on the food versus.
So we renew the contract each year, but I'm probably going to defer to Chris on that because he's been the one kind of handling the, like, he was in on the first initial contract and probably knows more than I know. I'm still in my baby step phase.
So I guess the question is, will that 10,000 possibly increase if our Chartwell pricing goes up?
Yeah, if Chartwell's determines that they need to raise either their administrative fees or their per plate fees, yeah, that would definitely impact that. But I've not seen the renewal contract yet, so.
So that would be a good
No,
thing to
yeah.
bring back when we're analyzing that sort of.
Now, to add to that, though, is most of these numbers on here that you saw today were numbers that I generated. That number that you're asking about is a number that was generated by Chartwell's. Okay, so if that's helpful.
And then the other one is, do we have any idea how Afton and Webster keep their pricing so low? I mean, Afton's a similar.
Yeah. Can we do you mind going back to that one, Chris?
I'm just curious if we know, we may not know, but it's a pretty significant, I mean, Webster's is a pretty significant amount lower than ours.
Yes, so,
Does that mean they're just eating more of the cost? So they're
potentially, or, like, there's so much that goes in, they could be really making it up on their à la carte side, right? Like, because that goes into the same thing. So they may have different options. So, for example, Kirkwood, for example, has three different tiers for lunches.
Oh, okay.
So they have like $4.50, and then it's like another one that's 30 cents more, and another one that's like 80 cents more. So they have different ways of bringing in that revenue stream, where we offer the one time, it's one lunch fee. It helps us get through the kids through the line. But yes, they have different ways of bringing in money as well. But I would say you're looking at those small numbers. Every district is having the conversation about raising those prices. You're welcome. Yes?
Yeah, I have two questions. One, so this $10,000 budget impact, do I understand that's because there's cost to the district, so we're paying a portion of this meal? The increasing prices doesn't cover the total amount of what we're going to expend for food. Is that right? The district is subsidizing.
It depends on what level. So if you think about, we can talk about breakfast, just because I was working on those numbers this morning. It costs us $1.71 to produce a breakfast. Chartwell's has a 22-cent fee on top of that. Okay, and then we get $2.28 back for every free student who does that breakfast in the morning. So I think that's, in my head, I think that's 35 cents that the district receives back. Okay, but when you get to the reduced lunch rate, after we get everything back from the state, it's 5 cents. But on every full paid student, the district is out of pocket $1.55. Okay, if that meal is not paid for. Okay, and then lunch, all of those are a little bit different because it costs more to produce a lunch. Their prices are different.
Oh, when you say the meal isn't paid for, you mean the meal is prepared, but there wasn't as high utilization rate on a given day?
Or, because to me, this board has made a commitment, and a commitment that I agree with, that we're not going to turn kids away at a food line, right? So if a student goes through that line and they don't have the money, this board has made a commitment to kids, and one that I admire. So that kid walks out of line with a meal instead of that meal being turned away.
Sure. The other question is, if you go back to your slide on utilization rates, I had asked a question, and maybe you got it forwarded to you in advance, but what was the utilization rate at the ECC, and maybe go back one more slide, the breakfast one, yeah. What was the utilization rate, if you had a chance to look it up yet, for the ECC and the elementary school in 2 prior years when we had the free breakfast?
I have that on my computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have it, that'd be great. I mean, my question is, and I know I've received some information already back initially on this, but You know, I would love to explore the possibility of bringing back free breakfast. I've been in the district 9 years. 8 of those 9 years, free breakfast has been available at at all the schools. But I know we certainly benefited from it at the ECC in the elementary school. So I'm just wondering if it makes sense to bring it back and what would be the budget impact there. One of the concerns I've heard, so that's, and I'm talking, so I'm giving you time to look at that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask that he bring that one back, because we did spend some time this morning actually going through the data that he had from Chartwell's, and there are some pieces that we're still questioning. So I don't want Dr. Dietrich to share information that is erroneous, and so we are prepared to bring that item back in June, if that's okay.
What, in a general sense, what would be your thinking about bringing back free breakfast, even if it's just at the ECC or the elementary? I certainly recognize that utilization rates have dropped, but I'm wondering if they were much higher, or if we even kept track of it, because kids sometimes just were walked as a class through the food line.
I would say
delivered to the
the
class.
only data point that I am comfortable sharing at this point is the number of breakfast meals that were served in a given year. As far as the amount of money, what it would cost, anything like that, I don't feel confident in the numbers. I've been working on these numbers since about 5:30 this morning, and I've been on with Chartwell's with their management, and it would not be professional of me to give you those numbers as far as dollar amounts. But what I can tell you is that in 2018-19, we served 102,000 breakfasts.
Okay, so that's substantially higher than the numbers here.
Additionally, I think we talked about this in a previous meeting. There were, I guess, substantial changes to the program. And I know that we explored what the cost would be to actually continue doing free breakfast. And I don't remember exactly. I know it's in board doc somewhere, but I think that the information that you want is probably in there.
Yeah, it was from the August meeting, but it doesn't include utilization rates. And there's some other problems with the data on the chart. But yeah, I did go back and look at that document.
So that's why I was asking if it's okay, Dr. Dietrich, I'm going to ask you not to share those numbers until we get a presentation together to give you the most accurate information, and he's not at a point right now where he's able to do that, and so we will put that item back on the agenda at an upcoming meeting. Thank you.
So are we voting on this increase this evening, or is it something for next month? Okay, this isn't a rush item, so. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item 3.03, the management software.
So this item was actually brought to the board last month, and there were some follow-up questions in regards to the implementation of Assembly. And just as a reminder, it's required per the Missouri Retention Manual for the district to retain not only the minutes from board meetings, but also the agenda. And so the current price that the district pays for board docs is approximately $9,000. By bringing forth through this agenda item would be approximately a $1,600 pay increase. So a few of the questions that were asked by the board during the presentation from Assembly was, does board docs allow for language conversion? As you can see, it does allow for language conversion. It also asks whether or not there was a search function across the modules. It also does keyword searches, and that information is also included in the responses previously provided to the board. And it also goes across to the evaluation piece. It doesn't go to the evaluation piece because of the confidential nature if we choose to use it for evaluations and things of that nature. What does the trailing entail? The training is unlimited. They also have videos and will do phone access and support in addition to virtual professional development options. One of the questions was, can you submit tickets to Assembly? We are able to submit tickets to Assembly as well as have access through the different chat features that they offer as a function. And then the rationale for purchasing. So just want to first thank Kat for actually doing the original research on it. When we were notified that Board Docs was transitioning to Diligent, in 2026, the function of Board Docs would actually be changing, which would not necessarily meet the needs of the district. But the other piece with Assembly is that we have a lot of old board documents that we can actually add to Assembly, and they do support with that, and also will transition documents in and have a function for that. We currently use Assembly for our policies, and so if you look at our policy modules, we are using that, but as we think about the idea of transparency, accountability, and building trust with our community, using Assembly would be advantageous for us because we can also include our committee agendas from the strategic plan, in addition to other items that we felt that we wanted to include easier access for community. As a reminder, this item will be coming back to the board tonight for action. But at this time, I will welcome any questions you may have.
I just wanted to clarify, so currently Board Docs doesn't allow language conversion, right? But Assembly does.
It does.
Which is great, especially when I have equity and access.
Yes.
So I think that's a great feature.
No. Now we have 3.04 athletics proposal, girls golf by Sean Evans.
Hello, I'm Rashad Davenport, Director of Athletics and Activities, and I have Mr. Dixon, who is our boys golf coach and government teacher as well.
Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Technical difficulties here. Thank you.
Thank you for your grace.
And thank you, Mr. Dixon, for coming tonight.
No problem.
All right, so we have our MRH athletic proposal for 2024-25 season for girls golf. So how does this fit in our strategic plan? You see where it says goals for our health, develop a comprehensive plan to support the growth and develop our talent. As you know, many of our young people have lots of talent. As we displayed the other night at our sports banquet, where we were able to recognize our young people in many activities across, whether it's athletics or our music activities. Also provide warm, welcoming, safe school environments. We all know that being part of something kind of increases our culture and helps our young people through high school. So the benefits of athletics, of course, physical fitness and health, also academic performance. As you can see that last night, well, was it, today is Thursday? I'm sorry, I got my days mixed up. So Tuesday night, we celebrated our young people for athletics and activities. And out of our 21 activities under MISA, 21 of them were recognized for a GPA of a 3.0. And so these are not individual students, these are actual teams. Character development and life skills, social emotional well-being, and college and career opportunities. So our current reality of boys golf, I want to let Mr. Dixon come and chime in here.
So currently we have, this year we had 5
individuals on our golf team. We had our first team win this year. We had 2 ladies play with us, showing their interest to want to have a girls team in the fall. We've continued to grow the team from 1, Cal is back here, and we were up to 5 this year, and it's continuing to grow. This year we actually were able to incorporate students playing other sports too. We had a tennis player that was also playing golf. We have continued to grow the team. We're getting more and more matches. One of the things that we struggle with a little bit in the beginning is we're the only small school that has golf. We don't have a conference, so like for a lot of the other sports, you are already guaranteed these other matches through your conference. Because we don't have that many other small schools have golf, we've been able to establish connections and really be able to build a really robust golf schedule for the kids. And we've actually, this year, we had 7 different matches with different schools.
So here you have the current listing of sports activities offered, and then if you could, the number next to it or the number of individual students who are actually participating in the sport. So I won't read it all to you, but there is, we want to make sure that we talk about equality and making sure we have equitable things for our young people. As you can see, the girls has 1 less sport than the boys. So that's one thing that we're also trying to make sure we do, is create equitable opportunities for all of our young people. Here is part of our budget, okay? So this particular portion here is just what we pay in salaries, okay? So if you, I can come over here so you guys can see. Each sport is detailed in how much that we pay out in salaries. If you look here, most of our coaches, most of our sports, we have 2 coaches. We basically have varsity and JV. At a small school, we do not carry a freshman team for the most part.
Mr. Davenport, the microphone's actually at the
Oh,
podium.
I'm sorry. I probably need to come back. Sorry about that. So most small schools do not have 2 sub-levels. The only sport that we have that has multiple sub-levels currently is girls volleyball. And so they have a total of 3 coaches. So current budget and allocation per student, as we talked about earlier, we have 23 sports and activities that are sanctioned by MISHA. So 21 out of the 23 activities are under the athletic department. So currently, right now, the only 2 activities that are not covered under the athletic budget would be the music activities and then speech and debate. But all of the other activities sanctioned by MISHA will come out of the athletic budget. The past school year, we had a budget of $13,500, and when we talk about the $13,500, that is for the supplies for the teams. So our overall budget is $252,000, but that number also includes salaries, and that number also includes athletic security, and also the fees for MISHA, and also the fees for our trainer. So the $13,500 here really speaks about the money that the students, that we have to actually spend on the students. Rationale. I want to let Dixon.
The thing with so for golf to advance from the regular season into districts, what happens is 21 players from each district. They divide the state into 4 different quadrants by classes, and you have your district competition. 21 students are eligible to advance to state. From that, you have your 2 top teams. There are 4 players there. Those players automatically go, and then there's 13 other players. Those 13 players are out of the 80 or so players that are left over. The girls have a competitive disadvantage, as Sarah had said, because if they play the boys' season, they have to play the same distance. They get no competitive advantage for playing as girls.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think that Ms. Colner's kind of adequately addressed definitely the need for this, and I think that there is a compelling reason to have this sport. So I'm not sure we need to reiterate everything that she so eloquently covered.
Okay.
So the next slide goes over the schools that are comparative in size and some of them comparative in location. You can see where it says you've got the first school top is U City. They have 5 girls on their team. Their student population is at 589. So as far as our population and the amount of girls we would have participate, we're comparatively around the same amount of young people who will participate as our neighboring schools and other schools who have girls golf. There's a student survey we did in the fall. As you can see, we had 22 young women who would be interested in girls golf. I know we had another interest meeting. There were 17 young people showed up. And then finally, here's the recommendation and also the cost breakdown in order for us to add girls golf. As you can see, a large portion of the golf is going to be the coach's salary. Golf is a relatively inexpensive sport to add because typically most of the young people come with their clubs, they come with their bag. What we mainly paid for this year was a facility and golf balls. And then we also have district travel and where we pay for a hotel, et cetera. Just because of the landscape of where we are geographically, a lot of the districts are held a ways away. Yes.
I have one question, and this is something that, I mean, you sort of addressed that. You said that some of the kids come with their own equipment, but as we're trying to make this equitable and accessible to all of our students, is there a plan to actually have equipment for those people that don't have golf clubs?
That's where it gets difficult with golf, because depending on the person's size, there's different size of golf clubs. And I would not want to invest in 4 or 5, 6 sets of golf clubs. And then if we have somebody who is taller or who is shorter, typically the kids that are coming, they have their clubs already because they're matched to the individual, if that makes sense. We could have the expenditure and get sets for the kids that they could use year to year.
Right, and I think that, I mean, the reality is that I think that the 2 most patented items are electric brushes and golf clubs.
Mhm.
And, so there's a lot of technology that's, put into these things.
Correct.
And you don't necessarily want to have people be at a competitive disadvantage. I don't know how much of an advantage different clubs make, but if sizing is a real issue, then I guess I'm just concerned about this being an elitist sport rather than a sport that's accessible. And this is, please don't take this to mean that I don't think it's important and I don't think we need it.
Mhm.
It's just something to consider.
Well, that is something that's being fought directly in the St. Louis area. We used to practice at the Normandy Golf Course. They have closed the Normandy Golf Course, and it's been taken over by the Metropolitan Golf Association, and their goal is to turn that into a youth golf facility. As they open back up, students will be able to go and play there at one of the nicest courses designed by Jack Nicklaus for $5. So they're doing things actively in this area to incorporate more people into the game. And most kids who play and have played have clubs already. We can get sets of clubs for them to use, but as they grow, they're going to go through different sets. So yes.
Could we, when we're messaging about this sport, let kids know that we will find the equipment for them? Because I could see a kid being like, I'm not going to participate because I can't afford
Yes.
to do that.
Yes.
To me, part of the messaging is letting them know, don't let that hold you back.
And to be fiscally responsible, we had the conversation, we had the meeting for these kids that haven't played or anything else. Like, look, you don't really necessarily need a complete set, a driver, an 8-iron, a pitching wedge, and a putter. We can start you off with 4 clubs to get the hang of it. So there are ways to do that in a fiscally responsible way to meet the needs of the kids.
So I have a question as we focus on equity and access, as Josh has mentioned, and the MRH as one of our mission. And we might have students who want to play like everyone is saying, but probably scared to step up because they don't have what's needed, not just the club, the shoes. Have you thought about reaching out to other organizations that's within St. Louis that are African American, Hispanics, whatever, to kind of get that support in, because they are offering free golf, free everything to the city schools, other schools? Have you all reached out to those type of organizations, see how can we partner with Maplewood, because we have children who are interested, especially young girls?
Yes, we can reach out with the First Tee and to the Metropolitan Golf and St. Louis Metropolitan Golf Association to do things like that, yes.
I just had a question of clarification. So the salary for the coach, is that, we're currently paying a salary for the boys coach, right, for you?
Yes.
Right? Okay. Are the girls and is the plan for the girls and the boys to continue to practice together as they are now? Or is the plan to have?
Well, they're actually in 2 different seasons. So the boys' season is in the spring, and the girls' season will be in the fall.
Oh, okay.
So
That answers all my
yes.
questions. Thanks.
And I just have one final thing. I just want to thank Ms. Kohler for coming and speaking to us. I know how difficult it is. But I'm very impressed. I'm glad you showed up to advocate for yourself and for your classmates, so thank you. Yes.
You saved us a lot of time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've got another question. I have a question about having students play 2 different sports in the same season. Is that something that we anticipate happening, like tennis and golf in the same
No, it's not
season?
something we're anticipating, but something that can happen.
It is okay for Misha?
Yes.
Okay.
Per Misha, you can play. Currently, what we do now is we have the young person, if they're planning on playing 2 sports, have them communicate with both of the coaches so they have an idea of the schedule, when they're going to be there, and how to make sure we coordinate things as far as games and practices.
Okay.
When did this come back to us to vote on? I know we have some eager students.
It comes back in June.
All right, perfect, thank you.
Sorry, one more question. So with the boys team had 5 players this season. If 2 of them would be eligible for the girls team, is that correct?
Yes.
You know, I'm also wondering if the creation of a girls team could create a situation where we don't have enough interest to run a boys team. What is the threshold for, is it like if there's one kid who wants to play golf, we run a golf team? I think this is a budgeting consideration that we probably need to have some thought about, and would just, you know, wonder what our threshold is. You know, we have this opportunity in a small district to, you know, make opportunities available for young people, and what does it, you know, what is the trade-off if we offer golf for a single student versus something else? So not really a question there, just a wondering as
Well,
as we go
there's,
forward.
and not to address the
Yeah.
budgeting part,
Yeah.
golf is a team sport, but it's also an individual sport. So if we have 5 people on the team, 1 or 2 of them may be the only ones to qualify for state. It's not an all or nothing. So it is possible, and that's not addressing the individual budgeting issue, but it is possible for individuals to advance outside of the team with golf as well.
It's very similar to cross-country, track, and tennis, where you can, and wrestling, where you can advance as an individual, even though your team may not be advancing.
Okay. But we would still need to fund a team even if we had only an individual playing. Like if we only had 1 student wrestling. in the
Right, we
whole
would still have a
district,
coach for that
we would
individual.
still,
Yes.
So, I mean, again, that is a consideration we'll have to think about. Unless the demand is just, you know, gonna start blowing up here, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving along. Admin communications, 4.01, MSIP 6, update, climate culture.
It's just a quick update. Just as a reminder, under MSIP 6, the district is required to give updates on our climate and culture efforts. The state requires that the district administer once a year a climate and culture survey. We actually administer twice a year to see growth from point A to B. So the climate and culture survey is out. The current participation rates for staff, just to give some context, for the fall of 2023, we had 200 participants. Right now for spring 2024, we have 103 participants. This particular survey is anonymous. The current response participation rates for families was for the fall was 386. For spring, we have 192 family participants. I will say that I received an email today from a resident asking questions about the survey. I did send a message and had a conversation with the University of Missouri-Columbia rep to see if some slight changes can be made, but not impact the reliability and the validity of the data that actually is collected. So I'm hoping to receive a response back, because I do think for some of those items where if a parent hasn't been in the building and doesn't know if the classroom is clean, it forces a parent to select something that may not provide us the data that we need. So I will provide an update for that, and I do enjoy receiving those questions from community, because it allows me an opportunity to research to see what options are available. Currently, the schools are administering surveys. We are still waiting for the middle school and high school to administer their surveys. Just as a reminder, we are mapping EOC testing. The elementary school did administer their spring survey. Fall, they had 377 participants. For spring, 322. And the enrollment at the elementary school is for 412 students. Just two other additional updates. We are continuing early because the collective bargaining agreement does not go into effect until July 1 with our CBA touch points. That meeting actually occurred this month, and the association brought forth items that are of interest for next year. That's helpful for administration because it allows us to plan over summer to be able to support the efforts being brought forward. And I concluded my final post checks with the middle and high school yesterday. CAT compiled that data into trends and buckets. What will happen is that information will be brought back to the board redacted, showing those themes that exist across all of the buildings, and then actions to support that. As a reminder, that information is discussed with building principals, and they are charged with then utilizing that information to make modifications for the upcoming school year. That is my report for climate and culture, and I welcome any questions you may have at this time.
So the family survey I've seen go out through regular district communication. Is there, will that continue to be pushed out through the deadline in those channels?
They will continue to be pushed out to families, and the information has been also published on our social media platforms too.
And what's the plan for increasing staff participation?
I will say that I am curious as to why the participation numbers are so low, because we did allocate time for staff to complete the surveys during the professional development day. So I will work with building principals to see if time can be allocated, whether it's through their PLC time or some other time, so that we can increase participation rate. I will just say that the same thing that I shared with the middle school and high school staff. This survey, again, is anonymous. I don't care who says it. The feedback is actually beneficial. For those touch points, I have had a couple other staff members to reach out to meet with me individually. So I've met with some small groups of teachers, one-on-one with teachers, and they have given some very valuable feedback, which is also will also be included, of course, redacted, so no one knows who those individuals are, to be compiled with the other data that will be shared with the board.
I have a question. It just, your answer just prompted this to me. I wonder if it's the staff feels they've been asked to complete too many surveys, and maybe they've just done one and they're like, I've done everything I have time to do.
So I will say we did discuss that in our CBA touch point. There is survey fatigue. However, the climate and culture survey is required. So there was some communication that I saw in regards to some of the other surveys. So Dr. McGee did a fantastic job this year of trying to allocate time for staff to do it during the workday, so that they don't have to use time outside of the workday to complete the surveys. So the optional surveys would be the stay and exit surveys. Staff are not required to do that, but they are required to do the climate and culture, particularly if we're providing time for that. But I will also say that another survey was sent out for them, not by the district. So if we're talking about survey fatigue, and if the goal is to improve climate and culture, the feedback that's actually being provided is helpful for us to be able to make some actionable steps to improving our efforts as an administration. So I don't have a response. The association has been fantastic with supporting and helping to communicate the district's efforts. We will continue to request that those surveys be completed, and of course they are still open for staff to complete. And so the goal again is to look at all of the data. Mr. Estrada will be bringing back to the board that data in comparison to the June data, the fall data. He will bring in June to give an update for the comparison. And at that same time, you will see the data that was collected from the post-check and some of the trends for that. In executive session, you will see the final 360 surveys, which are confidential and also anonymous, that will be completed on building principals. And just to give an idea, I do triangulate that data. I have conversations with principals in regards to the data, and they create action plans as a means to improve whatever feedback that they receive. And so it is a continuous improvement process. The data is being used. What we are working diligently to do is to communicate out when we have specific actions. So an example of that would be prior to our CBA touch points, in our last teacher leader meeting, the request for the middle school and high school was to stripe the parking lot and number the spaces so that teachers could have priority to those spaces. And so Dr. Dietrich has worked to ensure that that's done over summer. So the association helped push that back out so that they know that that is actually being completed. So I will say some of the feedback, and I think from has been helpful, is that while we are doing the work and it's getting done, being certain that we're communicating that out. And that also came as a part of one of the other schools' post checks that from the committees that we have. We do it when we were doing teacher leader and the collective bargaining, the CBTF, collective bargaining task force. We were given time for them to actually present during staff meetings, and so the principals were doing that. But the ask is that if there are committees like calendar committee, that those teachers who are on that committee get a couple minutes to address the staff as well. And I think that is helpful because we anticipate and expect, even though we have the MRH Insider and we include information, I think, just the reality of the pandemic, people don't read as much and the communication sometimes can get long. So having just, a quick update from the person who's sitting on that committee is helpful. So the feedback we get, we do take action on. We're just being a little bit more diligent in regards to communicating those pieces out. But I'm certain there is survey fatigue, but we do need the feedback in order to make adjustments.
Any other questions? All right. Moving on. Construction update by Dr. Rebecca.
All right, Ms. Kaufman, here's all your pictures. You ready? Okay. All right, so let's talk about middle school, high school building first. So everything is open. That is the joy that we have right now in that building. We have PE classes going on in the gym. The only, I would say, significant things that need to be completed is we made a bargain with the contractor. They wanted to put the bleachers in right away. When I was looking at the specs on the gym floor, it said to wait as long as possible to put in the bleachers. So I asked them to do that over the summer. What that allowed us to do is to move PE classes into the gym right away. So middle school kids have been very excited about getting in there. We've seen middle school groups in there after school. We've seen high school kids in there after school. So it's been really exciting just to see all of those areas open. So this is our student services as you enter. This is our new gym. There's Mr. Harbaugh talking with the students. Go back. So you'll see there's just a little cutout back here. There's not a lot of bleachers going in the gym. It's 3 rows. It's just enough if we want to have a C-team game in there, middle school games in there. That's what it was designed for, and it'll serve that purpose. As you can see, there's pickleball courts on there. One of my plans, it is, if you don't know, it's right now it's the fastest growing sport, and my plan is to use that for rentals here in the near future. And I know Mr. Holzer wants that to happen too, so that I can pay for that add to the budget.
It was our deal, yes.
Yeah, okay, right. Our trophy cases just got finished off last week, so we're looking forward to starting to see some items transition into those. And our outdoor commons is about, I would say, 98% complete. We have some rails that we sent back. We were not happy with the quality of them, so we still have some temporary rails there. Quality matters as we're finishing up this project. But overall, just the Commons is just really just a beautiful space. We had St. Louis Public Schools out touring our campus a couple weeks ago, and they walked into that space and they were like, oh my gosh, this is just gorgeous. They toured the building, gorgeous. Today we had a central office administrator from Webster and a principal from Kirkwood who saw the new high school in our space, and again, just in awe over the space and how it looks. Next one, I believe, is a picture. You'll see there's a gentleman up there working on the brick. That is one of our conformance items. We had some conformance work that they needed to be fixing, so we've had 3 masons on campus for the last 2 weeks, fixing quite a bit of work that we identified as not meeting the quality for MRH. So that kind of ties up that, and then we will go to the Maria J. Langston Administrative Building. So this was yesterday. That was yesterday, final sanding. And cabinets arrived yesterday, so that is really exciting. Those actually, they started installing those today. So today, cabinets were going in, and next slide, I think they are painting. So yesterday there was no paint in our boardroom. Today there's paint. Tomorrow we're doing the exposed ceiling in the boardroom. They're scheduled to paint that. Flooring is scheduled for about a week and a half out. Furniture is scheduled for June, I think it's June 13th, or June 15th, it's one of those 2 dates. But our goal is to have they turn off the internet at the old central office on June 26th from E-rate, and our goal is to have everybody in that building and operating by that date. So we're just very excited about how it's moving. The contractor there has been just a delight to work with. And you'll see next month there'll be some additional change orders coming, and there's a couple of those are credits because they're things that they saw that we could do to save some money on some different areas. So, questions? Yes?
So what's the status of the repairs to the track in the field?
So
Where would that fall at the?
That item actually is not included in this, and so I think from the previous questions that were submitted based on the board agenda, that item is coming back when Dr. Dietrich presents the facilities plan. He just finished the audit of all of our spaces, and he will then plan out a scope of recommended repairs based on the needs of the district. So that will come back to you sometime in June.
Is it the case that the construction equipment was responsible for damage to the field and the track? That's what I heard.
So there's a rumor that there's a large amount of damage to that is not accurate.
Okay.
There is a small amount of damage, and they are taking care of that.
So the construction company is
Yes.
responsible
Yes.
for making those repairs?
For a very small portion of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying there's other portions that we might be responsible for at some point?
The quality of
Yeah.
the track and field, I think, has been in question for some time. So, and is part of, I think, part of the presentation we'll be getting about a broader facilities plan.
I will say that I'm very well aware of the community concerns and board concerns, and I'm working very diligently on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So call back to my previous question. Completion of Building A.
Great.
It
Yes.
sounds like the bleachers will not be in until the summer.
Correct. So there's a lot of punch list work that needs to be completed. So we have given them basically 9 days at the beginning of June, and we've said we want your contractors in here and we want them in full force. So I think that date goes till, I don't have it on me right here, but I think it's to the 9th. And then on the 10th, we're doing another punch. so that we can get that back to them, because I've been very clear with them that they've had our spaces for several years, and now my custodial crews and my operations crews, we need to get in there and do the work that we should have been doing for the last 2 years because they've been here. So there's hallways we need to paint, there's things we have to take care of, but my hope is mid-June they're
Great.
gone.
The separate project, the new board building, it sounds as though we may be doing our July board meeting in a new space. Is that your anticipation?
I will
for us?
go on record that I will be shocked if we are not in there for the July meeting.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I
will
think
be
I'm more
shocked.
excited for Kat to not have to
Put that in the notes.
tote stuff over.
Yes.
Fabulous. So
Yes.
adjust your calendars accordingly, right?
Okay.
Progress on the video, we've got a lot of stuff to cover. I'm sure it's really necessary to launch that at a time.
So moved.
All in favor?
It
Aye.
doesn't.
Doesn't matter?
Doesn't.
All right, fine. All right, we're not doing that. Sorry, Ed.
All right, good.
All right, so resource adoption process by Dr. Crispin.
Hello, apologies in advance for the visual duplication you're about to experience, but I do have something, it's brief, but I do have something new and fresh and different, so.
And we tabled the video for today.
I'm sorry, I was talking to Ms. Dick.
Yeah, we're tabled.
Oh,
I know, I'm sorry. It's just, we got so much stuff.
you gotta watch it.
Well, we can watch
It had kids in it, there were students.
I'm sure it's delightful. All right, again, Dr. Chris McGee.
Ed.
Ed, can you get out?
All right, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to share the resource adoption process. It is not as engaging as Ed's video, but we're going to try and make it lively through our presentation here this evening. First, we'll start out with just framing up the conversation. So there's a difference between standards, curriculum, and instructional materials, and not always do we get the language right. In this case, the language matters. Oftentimes, we were in a meeting today, which we'll reference later on, where somebody says, we're going to go purchase a curriculum. No, you purchase a resource that helps you achieve the goals within the curriculum. So to truly outline that, I gave you a little bit of a framework here of what a standard is, what curriculum is, and where instructional materials lie. And while definitions are great, examples are better. So we have the second grade science example here. So Missouri State Standard there is 2 PS 1-2, where it asks kids in second grade to take data, test different materials, and determine what properties are best suited for an intended purpose. From that, our teachers take that standard, adapt it to meet their needs, and then within a process, identify what an essential outcome might be for a student. So they rephrased that standard in a way that works for them. And then with that, they went out and over a number of years prior to me getting here, a long time ago, adopted the MySci kit. And one of those kits is Unit 11, where it talks about a home for a penguin. And obviously, you can predict that that is going to be a cold item, that we need to have a little bit of information and experience to choose the best materials in which to protect an environment and keep it cold. So this is an example of what we're talking about when we're talking about a resource adoption process. That process would allow us to get to, hey, we should use MySci as our primary resource to teach science through there. And the curriculum is the set of objectives that we're seeking to achieve. So there's a number of different kinds of resources that exist. We specifically go through this process for primary ones that you would call tier 1, or ones that you would say every student that takes this course is going to use this resource. When touches every single student, that means that it needs to be vetted and make sure that it runs through a process to make sure that it is the right resource. It is vetted and backed by research. It isn't just something that's randomly found on the web or, searching WebMD. We don't want that. We want something that's been vetted through a process. So 2 slides are related to that, just denoting which ones follow that process, and then also recognizing that teachers are going to use the resource that best fits their needs, and that's where they have the authority and autonomy to bring in those supplemental materials. However, we do want to make sure that there is some consistency that, algebra, no matter who teaches it, has some consistency from teacher to teacher. Same thing with biology and so forth. There are a number of materials that don't require approval, and those things that are just specific to a classroom, specific to a reading group, anything that's sort of supplemental that a teacher might need to fit the needs of the child or the class at that moment. We utilized a website called Ed Reports. It's a nationally used platform that helps schools make sure that they make the right decision when it comes to adopting a resource. So they have a 6-step process. I like to simplify things, so I took those 6 steps and funneled them down to 3, where we are going to prepare for a process, make sure our ducks are in a row. We're going to study how a resource works, interacts, and meets our needs. And then we're going to launch a rollout plan, because we don't just purchase something and walk away. We make sure that through the process of going through here, once we adopt something, that we put the necessary steps through communication and professional development through a rollout plan. So that's why you see the prepare, study, and launch process. In my second year here in 22-23, I identified that we didn't have a process. We had policies, but we didn't have a written process to follow that was consistent no matter what the documentation was. So I started that. Luckily, I've been through this in a number of different of my lives prior to here, so I was able to rely on that along with the Ed Reports resource to complete that process and make it available for staff. You can see the details around what each of the steps entail with prepare, study, and launch. Basically, now that you know that this exists, when we do adopt something, it will come to you as a key portion of that process. From prepare, study, to launch, it could be as quickly as a semester. It could also take a little longer than that because of the amount of people that are involved in a pilot or the number of students that a resource touches. If you are doing something that is considerable across the entire district, you want to take your time. You don't want to be rushed, and you want to make it a wise decision. And our policy does state that we need to go through a curriculum review process the fiscal year prior to adopting a resource, according to policy IF. Some of the data that has been presented to you in the past just kind of sets the groundwork for future conversation. You see here just over the last 3 years kind of how we've been performing. And you notice that in the orange line, that math is sort of jumping off the screen a little bit, that it's something that needs a little bit further attention to reach the level of the other content areas. So we've identified math as being an area of emphasis, an area for us to make some opportune growth in that area. So resource adoption as part of the annual process, if we were to do this as it sort of typically is done, as you saw in the policy, you undergo a curriculum review process where you're doing some cycle kickoff, you're doing some writing, you're making sure that you all understand the standards, you know exactly what it is you want students to understand, know, and be able to do. And then you go into the summer preparing for a piloting and budgeting. That is your standard process that gets done. Oftentimes, because we are small and because we are nimble, we can adjust based on needs, and we've been working with our collective bargaining team to accelerate this timeline when there's a need. and the need that we're recognizing is math. So we kicked off our first meeting today with 30 amazing Blue Devils invited into a room to get us started. So we started today. We're meeting again next week to get things rolling. We've got a timeline that will take us through June. I even scheduled everything that's going to happen, and they know all the stuff that's there all the way through the process of January through May. We'll be bringing a presentation to you of how did it go, what's both the student growth data as well as the results of the teacher evaluation of the instrument, and we're excited to get going. What questions can I answer for you?
So just for background, for the public's sake, this presentation, thank you very much for putting this together and
Absolutely.
providing all this information. Came out of some conversations I've had with early childhood teachers about our literacy instructional resource, which was one widely used through the country called Lucy Calkins, which in the last several years has become, research has shown, has a really negative impact on students of color, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and children, especially that have dyslexia. And so they had identified that, that is still sort of what's been in place there, and given that we as a district are really focusing on equity, and what I've heard over the last couple of years is like, how do we get these, these scores up of these particular groups of students? And to me, it's the most basic way is by your resource, right? How you're teaching them. And so I know our teachers have struggled because I think there is inconsistency. Some have been able to work in their teams to sort of try to replace that. And so I know we've identified math. It is the lowest score, but I will note it looks like from 22 to 23, ELA dropped 10%. And so I guess my question is, and I know in talking with Dr. Jameson, the idea of teachers having to, because this will, I assume, primarily affect our younger grades, where we would.
It's a PK-12 process.
Math is? So you're doing, I thought, okay, so we would find, will we pilot it through 12?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I allow Dr. McGee, can you give some context regarding the conversation we had around what that looks like, whether it's PK 2, PK 6?
So we've got our team that we established today, so recognize that that's a part of it. We're going to look at what our best way to pilot that. We've looked at, like, let's say there's 6 teachers in 3rd grade. We might look at 3 do one resource, 3 do another resource. We also might look at, for a period of time, everybody does the same resource for a smaller period of time, of not a full semester, but maybe a quarter. But we're going to have the opportunity to pilot that math resource at the start of next year.
That also
Start of
includes
next year, calendar year or school year?
This school year, or in August.
Right, so that includes, just to build upon what Dr. McGee is sharing, so part of the conversation when you're thinking about adopting a new instructional resource, you don't want to do it at one level, and so the team will then look at the best way to actually go about doing it. So for example, you could adopt a resource, just say Eureka Math, which is also called Engage New York, actually goes PK 12. Okay. But let's just say the high school teachers say that that particular resource is not going to get them what they need. They may say that the high school wants to use another resource, and then the middle school and the elementary and ECC may say, we like Eureka Math. So they will decide that in that committee which resource they use, and then working in collaboration with the building principals, they will decide with their building leadership teams how they will go about implementing the pilot. And so as Dr. McGee said, so I'll use the ECC as an example. We have 6 grade levels. You may have, 6 classes at a grade level. You may have 3 who are doing one of the items and then 3 that are utilizing another resource.
Don't have to both do both.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
A lot.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind that is that you want to see which one is going to produce the best results, because they should already be aligned to Missouri learning standards, and they should be able to work through and align with the current curriculum. So as Dr. McGee said, the curriculum is what we want students to know and be able to do. the resource serves as a vehicle to help them
Right.
get there and actually lightens the load for them, which is what you're asking.
Right, because that's like, you know, me having to like create the law before I interpret, right? Like, it's a lot of work to do
Yeah.
for teachers, and so, okay, and I like that we're addressing all grades at once, so it's not piecemeal. I guess my question is, like, I feel like the ELA is like a really, really important one, and is there, what does that timeline look like then for trying to get a new resource there for, especially since, you know, we have one that has just, in all the research, and even like the New York Times, like they've done articles about how terrible that was. And
Yeah, so two things.
Okay.
One, what we have established with the initiation of math starting is a cycle. So
Okay.
what that means is once we're finished with the curriculum review cycle for math, literacy begins. So that means that we are basically trying to stagger that, trying to make sure that literacy happens 1 year, the year after math. So that would be not 24-25, but 25-26. I will also add that we know that based on the science of reading that there are 5 aspects of literacy instruction. We're working to make sure that we have a resource that is identified for all students in all 5 of those instances. In the case that you're referencing in regards to one of the resources, that is only applicable to one part of the Scarborough's rope, if you will, of the 5 avenues of literacy instruction. So we have
it's
purchased.
not two, I thought, no, because
So,
I know it didn't
let-
include phonics.
Sure,
as part
that's
of
what, exactly. So
right?
phonics we've addressed with
Okay, yeah.
foundations as a resource. Phonemic awareness we've addressed through the adoption of Haggerty.
Okay.
Fluency is the resource you're referencing. We've also purchased geodes, decodables, so not solely the resource you're referencing for fluency. Comprehension is an area in which does need a little bit of support. In vocabulary, we have both foundations and Calkins related there. So we've identified all 5 of those aspects and what resource currently is being used. And we also have our instructional coaches that are working with teachers to identify what parts are not problematic and how exactly we can support that through professional development and in-person support, both with our administrators and our instructional coaches.
And I will add, I think in part of the presentation and the information that I was able to review when I was working with Dr. McGee is that it's not, it's cyclical. So when they are done, like the item for math will more than likely be coming to the board in December, the work doesn't stop. Then you begin the process as outlined in the previous slide with reading or for literacy.
So they start this spring?
Well, the conversation would probably start, if we're bringing the item to the board in December, by then, whatever the time frame that we outline, it doesn't, it's going consecutively. It doesn't wait until the school year ends, the work starts. But I will also say that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education just recently released correct, just released the new updated list for materials that we can actually use as well. And the item that you originally asked about is still not on the list. So the district will not be utilizing that, but the teachers will have an opportunity to examine through the same process the different items that are listed, and that will be PK-12 too.
And it sounds like, I think what I heard you say is we would be looking possibly for one resource that addresses all 5, so that you don't have 5 different resources you're trying to learn.
Yes, but I would also say that the teachers love Haggerty and Foundation, so you don't necessarily, because that's already on the approved list, if the other items have that, you don't have to utilize that piece, you could just utilize the pieces. Yes.
And literacy is so different than math. Like, you wouldn't get a resource just for algebraic expression or functions like that. So literacy is just a little more nuanced, to your point of like, there would be a resource that would be specifically focused on comprehension and fluency and strategies related to that.
And I'll just add one additional piece. Again, the post checks are very helpful. And one of the buildings that asks is for the teaching and learning facilitators or coaches to spend time actually supporting. So particularly at the ECC, we had some situations where the teaching and learning facilitator did not have the opportunity to finish out the duties, but that's part of the conversation that we're having, is how can the teaching and learning facilitator lift the load for teachers as they begin through their professional learning communities, begin to plan. And so if the teaching and learning facilitator is carrying the lift for that, that then removes from the plates of the teachers the ability to have to go out and find resources. They have a thought partner. And so I would say that that's one of the things that did not happen. And as the building is working through the use of the PLCs, but that came out in another building too, regarding assistance with the curriculum and the implementing the units and the work that they have. So I think we have a plan to ensure that the load is not heavy while we're working through the math process and also entering the piece around literacy.
And then I'm sure you'd be like sort of regularly up checking in with teachers and stuff to
wanna
make
talk
sure
about
they're
that?
getting, and I guess that's a question for me, I guess in your world, Dr. McGee, you know, how much time do you on average sort of spend in the classroom, you know, like assessing, or how do you, like this is clearly like a large sort of part of education, and how do you stay on top of, and how do we stay on top of making sure we're addressing these things quickly? Because I know when I've talked to like people in other districts, like we're behind the curve here a little bit on this literacy piece, and so like going forward, you know, it took us 8 months to create this procedure, so it's sort of a year lost. Like, so how are we going forward, making sure we're sort of on top of that and updating our resources or analyzing them, you know, in a...
Jenny, what do you mean by us being behind?
So I know others, when I've talked to people in other districts, like they've already replaced all of those pieces, right? They have piloted or are finishing piloting, and so I think, you know, this is the whole Lucy Calkins thing has been like for several years.
So their data encouraged them to prioritize that, where we've prioritized math with our data.
Well, but we've also been talking for a couple of years about test scores and all that, and so for me, you know, clearly this has been an issue for the last couple of years. So like, I'm asking in the future, how do we speed this up a little? It feels like we're a little behind.
Can I address that one? So I will say that the district has not had, and I've talked about this openly, a codified process for the curriculum adoption process. And the idea, again, MRH is so small and nimble, nor was there a process for the development of the selection of an instructional resource. And so to the first part of your question, I'm on the commissioner's literacy cohort, so that's how I knew when you asked the initial question of when the new list was coming out, because I'm on there. And so I probably will ask some follow-up questions at our next meeting, because a lot of districts are in the very same place that we are. And so for those individuals who adopted resources, from my last conversation, people adopted resources that weren't even on the approved list. And so I would venture to say that those who did actually go through the process, so it's taken us a little bit longer because there wasn't a process. And so if you want to have the ability to replicate the process throughout, you got to codify it and ensure that you can have it. And so Dr. McGee has done that. I would say the part around the data, not just the last few years, MRH's data for Black and brown kids, free and reduced lunch students, and also students with IEPs is not just a few years issue. It goes back way beyond that. So I think if we're talking about if it was a priority, my understanding would be that the district would have prioritized that prior to my arrival and prior to Dr. McGee's. Now, to the question about prioritizing, we recognize that it is an opportunity, and so we are working to address the needs. And so please know that we're not saying that it's not important, but if we're saying we want teachers to not have a heavy load and also have the ability to implement with fidelity, then having them to take things through is not prudent, and I don't think would be a recommendation that I would bring forward based on my experience and my work currently with the Literacy Commission, who's leading this work. Lucy Calkins has been in the district for a very long time. I've worked in spaces that uses Lucy Calkins. It is not a great resource, but I do think we have a plan forward to support teachers this upcoming year as we focus in on literacy. Math, and as they work on literacy, I think we have a pretty good idea, and Dr. McGee has kind of worked through with that.
Yeah, and to clarify, I don't think I said we didn't find it important. I just said, you know, it seemed to take us longer than it should have because we spent a year developing a policy, right? This was identified in March, we didn't finish it till December, so to me, that's sort of a year lost when we knew, you know, there were issues with it. That was the point I was making, and it seems like other districts perhaps, I mean, people I talked about, you know, one of them was Benchmark, which is on the list, so I'm just asking, moving forward, you know, how are we making sure that we are sort of staying on top of that, and is it, you know, it's my understanding too, there was a process, you know, it just, the vehicle with which that process occurred, the function of it changed, so then there was no process. And so anyway, I'm just asking moving forward, like how, you know, what are the steps we're taking to make sure we're sort of staying right on top of that?
So I can respond to that. I will say that because I'm in the seat, there wasn't a codified process. And so being clear for me, when we talk about a codified process, it's written, it can be replicated, and someone can put their hands on it. So it did not exist. So I will.
No, I know that. It wasn't codified. I get that.
So we wouldn't know, people coming in who have to do the work wouldn't know. In regards to what we're doing, so I actually engage in collaborations with principals, and I also engage in instructional walks. And so as we go into the classrooms and looking at the implementation, so each building has foci that they're looking for. So for example, at the ECC, they are looking at implementation foundations. And so when we're walking, we're looking at that. I coach principals, and then they work through with teachers to seek improvement on those areas. We also, as a district, are implementing professional learning communities. So Dr. McGee leads that work with the consultant, Nathan Ware. He comes in, he observes, and he gives feedback. So as I continue to say that we're a continuous improvement district, we are in classrooms frequently enough to know what's happening, and we also are looking at the levels of feedback. And so when a principal is in a classroom, I am looking at the type of feedback that they're given to make sure that A, they have to schedule the time to be in order to know what's actually happening. And so that's typically what happens in most districts. When you ask, Dr. McGee can talk specifically to the mechanism that he would use if you that you talked about, the survey. So he created part of the process is that teacher will be able to give feedback. So if you can talk about that, is what she's asking.
Yeah, so during the pilot process, is that what you're talking about, Dr.?
Yes.
Okay, so during the pilot process, we'll do what I call weekly checks, which is just simply like if something came up while you're implementing this, let's jot some notes. What went well this week? What are opportunities for improvement? And we use that as part of our data collection process during the pilot to make sure that we can get feedback from teachers and make sure that they don't forget that really awful lesson that happened while they were implementing that, or that really great thing that the resource provided, to make sure that we bring that back and uncover that at the end.
And that might be a good thing to continue moving forward too, after you've adopted it, just to maybe check in and say. And then do you also then go in the classroom too?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on the instructional walks with Dr. Jameson.
Great.
Absolutely.
So
And I meet monthly with building principals, and then I've got the professional development committee that I meet with monthly. Yes, I'm readily available and visible, I hope. I believe that I am.
I guess I have a question about this whole thing. If the curriculum is what they need to, teach the kids, and that's clearly thought out, like how important is this resource? Like if they've got a book, shouldn't they know enough to just not teach incorrectly? What am I missing?
Yeah, a lot of the things, the day-to-day in the classroom requires more things than you could ever possibly imagine. And having the support of a resource allows you to go and pull something you trust and be able to deliver that to students on the ready.
I guess my question is, if we give them autonomy, and we know that the teacher should know how to teach somebody how to read, like what does it matter what the resource is? That's the part I don't understand. How important is that?
So I'd say from a planning and preparation standpoint, so the benefit of our teachers is that they have written their own curriculum, but when you don't have a resource, you have to go out and find materials to support the curriculum. And so when we talk about the data and the disparities amongst students, a resource may provide ways to differentiate for different groups of students, and a teacher doesn't actually have to go out and find something if we're talking about.
Or create all the math problems.
Or a formative assessment,
Right,
et
well,
cetera.
I
Yeah,
can
so.
see math being more of an issue, but I mean.
Can I give you an example that
Yes,
I learned from, so, and maybe I'm wrong, so if this, any of you teachers correct me, but, so like, let's just say like Lucy Coppins was missing phonics, and so, and like, they focused on like cues, so like, it was like, look at the picture, this begins with a B, look at the picture, and figure out the word from the picture rather than sounding it out, like, that's how it, yes, that's why it's bad. And so, what if there's like a bee and a butterfly, right? You don't know, like, you're 5, you don't know, like, one word is longer than the other, and like, and so that's the problem. That was the method with which teachers were taught to teach reading. Well, that's a terrible, like, it didn't work. And so
No,
now
I get
so
that.
it's like you come going to like, I have to figure out, like, I have to create the law in order to like then interpret it, right? Like it's where you go to get your sort of basis of what you're going to teach.
Right,
and then you,
but I get that, but I guess what I'm saying is that if I know that there's a difference between how you pronounce things, like why does it matter?
but how do you teach that to children? And children who learn differently, right?
I don't know.
I think is the hard part, you know, like
Maybe, I guess I'm just like,
This is why I'm not a teacher.
No, I know.
Do it, right? It's
I
very
suppose,
difficult.
yeah,
like-
my education is a little different, but whatever.
You had, sorry, Brian.
Well, I don't want to unnecessarily extend the conversation, but I think your question is, at least I understood your question, it was a question I had too. I like the idea of the district approving some resources, but they're options and they should be available, but presumably we also free the teachers to identify their own resources without going through an approval process, correct?
Well, the problem with that though is that if we're gonna spend money on it, it should be, I mean, it's something we have to approve, and I get that.
Oh, for the money, for the things we spend money on, yes,
Oh, but
right.
I mean, but it's unfair to ask a teacher to go on.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. The resources are available to them. They shouldn't have to do that, but should they choose to create their own tool, their own resource?
I think it's a consistency thing too, right?
Yeah,
We're
it could be
teaching
how-
children to read in the same way instead of.
So I would say, I think,
I just
to land the plane, no, it's fine. I think these are all great conversations and maybe something to come back for a work session. When you go through teacher ed program, and I'm thinking about those who are certified to teach elementary school, they give you a methods of teaching reading class. They give you one. And so you really don't learn like the training. We had teachers, Annie just sent the email saying that the teachers finished some additional training. The level of depth that they get in that professional development helps them to teach literacy better for kids. And so the idea of having a resource means that the load is lighter for them to actually do. To Brian's question around resources, so teachers do have the autonomy to bring those resources in the classroom to supplant anything that they feel is missing in the curriculum. In the resource, teachers will still have an opportunity to do that. If we want to see across all grade levels the same level of growth, having a consistent resource to do that makes it easier. And so, I understand the teachers as I taught elementary school, I've taught middle school, and I've taught high school. I'm a unicorn. It does make a difference when you have a resource. It gives you the ability to pivot and make swift changes. But I will also say that as we think about what we identify, it's going to be critical that we go through a process that can continue to be replicated. So I think we're in a good spot for that.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I
Dr.
agree, this is great.
Yeah, and I think just, one final point, one point of concern though is that as we notice that kids learn differently and they have different needs, I mean, as long as the resource is adaptable to.
There was like a differentiation piece, so that was a separate type of materials, right? That
Exactly.
was so there's
And
one for sort of
I'd like to highlight,
non-GP, there's one.
I'd like to highlight our team today did an amazing job of identifying that is going to be something that's on our rubric that we will use to score the resources to make sure that it is adaptable, malleable to meet the different needs of our students. So that is exactly why we bring a team of teachers together and we do this in collaboration.
And sorry, I know, one more thing, and just to bring back to the point of why this is important, because to me, this particular issue gets at the root of equity, right? When we're talking about test scores, we're talking about kids, we need to find resources that are teaching all of our children, right? In a way that lifts them all up. And so I appreciate you spending the time on this, because to me, this is really imperative as we move forward with those goals. So thank you, and I'll be quiet.
I agree, Jenny, and I would just like to clarify, because you did, say some things earlier about, we have a current resource that's really problematic. Could you clarify for us, if a teacher or a group of teachers identify that the approved resource material is not appropriate, are they forced to continue to use this, or is this something that, can be adjusted in real time?
Well, all teachers do that every day. That is teaching. And they do that with the support of their building administrator and their instructional coach. And none of this is done in isolation. It's important to be a part of a team. And when the team works together to identify the best path forward, they do that. And that is the community that we're working to create here.
All right, moving on. Okay. Staffing updates by Dr. Shonda.
So while Dr. McGee is pulling that up, thank you. I'm bringing this staffing update back for staffing at a glance for this month, where we are right now. This data is actually, I changed the slide, it's as updated based on today's. So initially when I uploaded this on Board Doc, it was based on 5/10. It is as recent as today. So again, this is a moving target. It always changes. Staff members, as you know, if they are tenured teachers, they have until June 1 to be able to resign from their current position. So that is a possibility that we may see some resignations or even shifts in terms of internal transfers. But I brought this back to you. Our certified teachers in the district, again, it's 129.86. For the purpose of this presentation, I was asked to define what certified teachers were. And so at the bottom, certified staff are our teachers, our counselors, our librarians, our specialists, interventionists, and coaches. Again, those are the individuals who are a part of this presentation. Other certificated staff members are at the bottom as well. They're not included in that. That's just for just general information to let you know other individuals that hold certifications. So resignations, we're currently at 17 resignations and or retirements. So that's year to date. We have 2 retirements. Of those, we also have 4 internal transfers and 11 true resignations. Those individuals are exiting the district. 3, again, internal transfers. We have already approved 3. 1 is pending board approval tonight. And then unfilled positions. We currently have 8 unfilled positions. One of those unfilled positions is an ECC assistant principal. And again, interviews are underway, and we are bringing some hiring recommendations to the board for those positions tonight. I also would like to take this opportunity just to really thank all of the parents, the association members, many teachers. We had teachers at every level who were part of the community conversations last night, and we had several board members who participated in our community conversation around staff retention. So thank you for that. What questions might I be able to answer for you?
I just want to thank you for adding that at the bottom. That is very helpful for me as I look at this. And then I just had a question. So we have, and I know you answered this, but I don't quite understand. So we have an internal transfers line, but then in resignations or retirements, we have internal transfers. And does that mean the person resigned and then we were like, hey, do you want to do this instead? Or I guess I'm not sure how that works.
So those individuals applied for another position within Maplewood Richmond Heights School District.
Okay.
So, for example, we had 1 elementary teacher, certified staff member, apply for an admin position.
Okay.
So they're still within the district, they're just in a different role. We had 1 elementary teacher who moved to the ECC, 1 high school teacher who moved to the middle school, and 1 middle school teacher who will potentially move to the ECC. They're still in MRH. They just vacated their current role that they have for the 23-24 school year, moving into a different role.
And we have to count that as a resignation, even though it's just a transfer.
Well, it is an opening. It is a current. So right. So when they vacate that position, it creates a vacancy, And so just to make sure that I delineate and for transparency purposes, I want you to understand what those 17 resignations or retirements look like. Great question.
So where does this fit in terms of, because we've also received invoices from Kelly Staffing Services over the course of the academic year, and it looks like at the ECC maybe 6 to 7 full-time subs every day are being paid to be in there. Is that right? Did I read that correctly?
Would you like me to come back and bring a presentation?
No, I'm just wondering, does that add to the number of 8 that we have in addition to the 8 that are that we need to fill this year? Do we not also have positions held over from last year that have yet to be filled?
No, I gave a presentation on that previously. Our Kelly sub employees are not MRH employees. We contract services through Kelly Services to be able to provide staffing. Those individuals would not be a part of our...
Right, I understand. So there'd be an addition to this. Because if you look at the Kelly Staffing Service invoices, there's 6 positions at the ECC that are listed as teacher vacancies.
So just to give context, I think I talked about this in exec. I would ask that when we go into exec, I modified the agenda to address that again, because I think I addressed that at a previous meeting regarding why the ECC had more subs allocated, but I can address that during exec session if that's okay.
Well,
and then also, there might be staff members who are on FMLA. I mean, you have subs for...
This is teacher vacancy. It doesn't... It's not just with the ECC.
But is your basic question, like, did we have positions that were
unfilled from last year?
Yeah.
The only position that we had that was unfilled, and I reported that to the board, was a middle school teaching and learning coach position. That was the only position that was not filled from last year. So I think I would have to understand what you're referencing to be able to give a more informed response.
I know what you're talking about, and I can address that in the exec session if that's okay.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, all right, next is finance. Fiscal year 24, April finance statements.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll skip to slide number 3, which is our revenues, so we're just going to hit the changes here. Operating revenues are about 80% of the budget and lower than the prior year due to the timing of local tax receipts. However, as a side note, I will say that last week I came into work and we had a pending deposit of $4.2 million for the impounded protested taxes did hit the bank. So that's the one that always makes us a bit nervous. Those are there and have been allocated. You'll see those in the statements next month. Jumping to expenditures, our purchase services are $2.5 million, 70% of the budget, a little bit higher than they were this time last year. Supplies are just under 65% compared to 69% last year. Capital outlay is about 81% and tracking as we expected through April. Overall operating expenses are $20.4 million or 73% of the budget and are comparable through April as to the prior year. Operating fund balances as a percent of expenditures are, as we've been discussing the last few months, right around 36% at the end of the year. Any questions?
I just had a clarifying question in looking at the detail. Is elementary cover ECC?
Yes. Yeah, the 1111 is the instructional code for both, yes. Okay, Mr. President, shall I continue with the next item?
Yes.
Vice President.
Please.
Okay, let me bring this up real quick. Sorry for the transition time here. We're going to jump to slide 6, as it is all of our operating funds. The closer we get to the end of the year, the clearer picture we have on how revenues and expenses are going to track. Of course, when we set those budgets in the summer, in the spring, excuse me, we are making those on assumptions, using the best information we have available. As more information or better information comes along, we do need to make adjustments. So in this regard, revenue at this point is decreasing about $8,600. Expenditures right around $8,000. The transfers are here as noted, both increasing and decreasing. Decreasing to the teachers fund, increasing to the capital projects fund, and the numbers here reflect that. The fund balance did shift downward 0.07%, but again, we'll bring another amendment as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year.
Can I ask a basic question about amendments? This is new to me, I'm
Sure.
sorry. How often do these come up? Are they just sort of like, are they set time, are they random, or?
We have in the past had a standard pattern. I usually bring 4 to 5. With our staffing challenges this year, we've been a little bit delayed on that, so this is number 2. So yeah, typically there will be a normal cycle, and Dr. Jamison and I are actually talking about what a potential updated cycle might look like in future fiscal years.
And then just I guess a question I had, for me it would be helpful if it was possible, if we could add 2 columns at the end that just says like overall change and overall percentage change, right? Because this is what we started with, what we thought we were going to do. But the comparisons are just sort of the last budget. I guess for me, it would be helpful to know what we initially planned and then sort of how we're tracking against that. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. That's typically not how we envision the budget, though, because the budget is the budget as you approve the amendment, so that becomes the budget at that point. So anything that happened before that becomes not relevant.
I understand that. I'm just saying, like, as we are thinking ahead, we originally thought this was the right amount. Clearly, we were off, and so for me, I mean, I can perform my own mathematical functions, but it's just helpful if it's easy to do in the software to just sort of add that, so I sort of in my own planning can track how that.
So we
actual budget versus actual. Is that right, Jenny?
We're currently working to look to see what other districts are doing, and so during our next check-in, I will have an update on some of the things that I found from our last conversation to provide some additional context, and then that will give us an idea to talk about, for me to talk about with Chris, if there are adjustments that need to be made. So we are talking about changes to whether how presentations come forward, at what point they come forward, and then what information is shared. So if we could maybe get some time to do that, perfect.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Chris?
Yes.
Would you mind kind of walking through the items here?
Well, actually, before we do that, Ms. Corcoran, is here to take the latest display.
Oh, sure, happy
And I was
to.
hoping that, we could switch to her presentation just so she can be student.
So you'd like to motion to
Yeah,
amend the agenda?
Yeah, exactly.
To
Like,
move 6.02 to 5.02.
yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, perfect.
Thank you, guys. I did take my AP Bio test today, and then went on to play the soccer game, so I'm
ready.
Having some time to get home. All right. Good evening, everybody. I am the Vice President of our Principal Advisory Leadership Board, and tonight will be our last presentation of this school year to all of you. So just to get things started, we kind of wanted to recap what we've been working on lately and what we have coming up in our schedule. So in the next few weeks, we're working on being able to visit our other district boards, getting together with the middle school, and then going to visit the ECC and the elementary school to recognize our PAL members at each of those levels. We have certificates for each of them honoring their commitment to the PAL board this year, and are looking forward to being able to celebrate with them and kind of recognize their achievements and commitment to this group. We've also been spending a lot of time meeting and working on our year in review, so taking time to really reflect on what we were able to achieve this year, making sure that is all documented in the proper way so we can kind of build that foundational structure for future years. And with that, kind of jumping ahead, we've also been working really hard on our application for next year, so reviewing what that application looks like, editing that application, and actually getting it posted for MRH high school upperclassmen to apply for the next year of the PAL board. And then we will also be presenting at the freshman fair that was rescheduled to next week to make sure that members of the community, upcoming freshmen, are aware of this opportunity and the work that we're working to do for them. So just making it known that the PAL board exists to help them, and that later when they're upperclassmen they could also join the organization. So these are some bullet points from the year in review and the reflections that we've been doing based on what we were able to bring to all of you and to the community this year as the inaugural year for the PAL board. So we've been able to attend and present at a majority of the board meetings for this school year, which was really incredible. A new experience for this district and kind of a new experience overall for the St. Louis area, so we're really excited that we had that opportunity. It's also really important to us that we were able to collaborate with so many different students throughout the district. High school, middle school, elementary, and ECC really gets back to our core mission of making sure that all students are heard and that all voices are amplified, so we really want to highlight that. We were also able to connect with our high school audiences regarding construction updates, resource updates, making sure to kind of start bridging the gap between the Board of Education and the administration and the everyday high school student, and that's work that we hope to continue into the future. And we were able to bring you guys monthly focuses and directed asks based on areas of interest that the student body or the PAL board discerned, which included mental health and stress, goal setting, and academic transitions. And then our last big milestone is being able to hold the Meet the Candidate Night, that forum that we were able to hold for the board member elections, which was a labor of love for the PAL board. It took a lot of effort to put that on for the community, but it was incredibly successful, and we really appreciated that opportunity to be engaged and involved. So our work for our students in this past month, like I previously mentioned, we were able to post and send out the application for next year. We're still working on making sure it's accessible to students and publicizing the opportunity to join the board, but the application has been made available. And the next bullet point, it's a lot of words, but basically we're just working on being able to continue work with underclassmen who aren't actually offered positions on the PAL board itself. So we've noticed that we have an 8th grade board right now with a lot of incredibly engaged and interested students, and we don't want them to feel a disconnect for 2 years until they become an upperclassman who can join the board. So right now we're exploring and discussing what opportunities to engage those younger students might look like, maybe an additional advisory council that then speaks to our PAL board, or just another way of connecting those students so that there's no divide between our middle school kids and our high school board. So for our community, our high school PAL board members are continuing on with the strategic plan committees. They'll continue to occupy those positions for the remainder of the term. Our students have reported that that's been a very educational opportunity for them, that they've enjoyed being able to kind of connect in those spaces and represent student voice. So we're excited to see those opportunities to continue. We've also been participating in community roundtables throughout the school year, and that is work that will likely continue throughout the summer, both with roundtables and community conversations, and making sure we have student voices present there. So basically, in closing, we just want to highlight how grateful we are for the opportunity to kind of represent student voice and amplify the students here at MRH by taking on this new role and this new position. We found that continuing to collaborate with students and the administration and the board has been really critical and integral to our making progress towards our overarching goals, which are just communication, transparency, bigger things like making sure we're able to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion here in our school district, elevating student voice and opinion, and just overall doing the work, as we often say here at MRH. So we've really appreciated this opportunity, being able to kind of pioneer this for the district, and we're super excited to see where it goes next year. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question per se, but when your colleague was here last time, you know, I also wanted to extend my thanks to you and all the hard work that you've done. And I'm really proud of y'all, all the work that y'all done.
Thank you.
It's been, I think, a great addition to the board.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
So I think we're going to move back to 4.02. I'm sorry, 5.02. Excuse me. I believe Mr. Vance has a question.
Yeah, so I was meeting with one of our community members the other day. They have looked at these charts that you provided, and they were just wondering if it could be explained. So this, you know, for my benefit, but for the community's benefit, if you could just explain the difference in these revenue streams that come from local, county, state, federal for general fund, special revenue fund, debt service fund, bond issue fund, and capital projects fund. How are all of those determined, and how are we getting those? Why are we having to amend the budget for those numbers? Can you just explain for the benefit of?
It's a very in-depth topic that would take hours, so I'm not sure that we can do that at this point in time. County revenues related to our sales tax, Prop C, state revenues in the way of formula, classroom trust fund, also grants. A lot of grants have fallen under the state umbrella this year. Federal revenues, of course, those are primarily our Title I, II, and IV revenues. We've got some ARP funds that are still being distributed that exist in there. As far as where those funds go, we typically put our formula into our teachers fund. That lessens the amount that we have to transfer into there. We allocate 10 cents of our tax revenues to the capital projects fund. Beyond that, why we make adjustments, because as I stated before at the beginning of this, we make our revenue estimations based on the best information we have at the time. And of course, as those things change, we have to amend the budget to accommodate those.
Sure, and maybe one other question and a clarifying question on this. So when they look at, this person was showing me their tax bill, and they're saying, and there's one line for the MRH school district. So you're saying that one number is getting it's not being broken out for them there, it's being broken out for us here. That some of that money is going to debt service, some of it's going to bond, some of it's going to general.
Correct. Yeah. If you look at the agendas for the tax rate hearing, you'll note in the motion that you approve takes care of the allocation. So St. Louis County has is a multi-rate county, so we assess on every property class. Other districts combine those into a blended rate. That's the rate that DESI uses. So we take that blended rate that's given to us by DESI and the calculations from the state auditor's office in the pro formas, we take that and we allocate that to the various funds.
Thank you. One last question, and they were asking about this, and I was trying to explain to them, starting on page 8 to 30, well, to the very end, you have all these debits and credits of your accounts for this double entry bookkeeping. But could you just, I was trying to explain this to them, but could you give just a brief explanation of why we're getting dozens of pages of these debits and credits?
Sure, yeah. As things change over the course of the year, again, when we set budgets, those are estimates. So if, let's say, the elementary school needed to spend more on, copy paper, for instance, but their instructional supplies budget was running low, they would look at their available accounts and any available budgets, and we would do a transfer from one to the other to accommodate that change. That's a simplistic example, but if you take that and expand it to all of the 2,400 plus accounts that we have, along with all of the employees that touch those accounts, you can see how that becomes exponential over time.
Thank you.
I have one question, just curious. We had an increase in our expenditures for benefits, and what was the reason that that increased? Was there did we renegotiate benefits? Do we have more employees?
No, it's, I'll have to dig into the exact,
It was 9% increase, so.
yeah, I can bring more back to you on that.
Okay.
Hey, I just have a suggestion, because they brought some good question, and the community want to know. I'm not sure for one of our community talks, if that's something you have more in depth, where the community could come out and ask their questions and go over what they're discussing.
That's actually, I was talking to a community member at Dr. Ambrose Phillips' last community conversation. I'll be putting something out just open where if there are topics that are of interest, community can put that as we begin to plan for next year, so that those topics are actually directly aligned to the interest of the community. So that's an excellent idea. Thank you for that.
Can I piggyback on that? Something we started on city council, which I really loved, was in November, was like a work session for the public to come in, and the finance director would give a sort of an overview of how the budget works, and then allow people in the community to say, well, this is how I would like to see my money spent, just so the board, the council gets some ideas about that. So I think that's another great idea to think about for the future, so anyway.
Okay, so now we're moving on to 5.03, budget presentation 3, revenue updates and expenditures, given by Mr. Manager.
I'm not sure if there's something going on with Google, but give me just a moment, because I'm having the same problem Dr. McGee was having. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. McGee.
Your presentation is important to me. Please stand by. Your presentation is the next presentation I'll be loading.
Okay, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not feeling as nimble and a little off by this. Dr. McGee, if you could advance until you start seeing expenditure things. Revenues are unchanged from last month, so I won't belabor that. Okay, so right now we are projecting our salaries to increase oh, thank you, that's wonderful. Increase a little over $800,000, 5%, and that is due to our planned movement on the 2-year salary schedule for teachers, and also the new salary schedule for our support staff that was implemented for this fiscal year, and also the percentage increase for administrator salaries. Benefits, we did get our benefits rates from the trust last week, and I was pleased to see that those came in at 9.1% on the increase, which is markedly lower than what I was anticipating, so that's fantastic. When it comes to purchase services and supplies, you can see the numbers here. I won't read them to you, but 2.8% and 12% for purchase services and supplies. That brings us to our potential large supplies expenditures. Capital expenditures are anything that is over $1,000 per item. So I felt it was not a great idea to put some of our larger expenditures in the capital projects category, so I'm including them all here. Because some of them aren't capital projects are not capital expenditures. So we are bringing in touchscreen Chromebooks for our little kids over the grade at the kindergarten. We've long known that Chromebooks without some sort of a touch interface are not necessarily age appropriate for at least some of our kindergartners, if not all. So that's been identified by our teachers for some time now. So we are making good on that. We're adjusting the refresh cycle for our Chromebooks, hopefully to extend their usable life, so there's the cost for that. Our teacher laptops are on a 4-year cycle. Digital signage is another thing that we are in negotiations about amongst the buildings, making sure that we are able to get information to our community as they enter our buildings and also to our students. However, I will say that signage is not always the best way to do that. So I'm looking very carefully to see how that signage would be implemented before that's something that we move as a full-blown recommendation. Interactive displays, typically, right now we're The trend we're seeing now is moving away from the interactive projectors and more to the flat screens, interactive flat screens. The price is actually cheaper now for the flat screens than it was when we purchased the projectors. So things have kind of flip-flopped as far as the market goes. Teacher responses, well, sometimes changing the way a teacher interacts with their lessons is a challenge. So we're making this change carefully. Now the actual capital outlay. We are expecting a slight decrease on budgets as we review and negotiate internally and decide what can and cannot fit. But looking at the cell booster at the elementary school, that's a significant concern. The elementary's always been a problem for us. It's one of the main reasons we jumped from AT&T to T-Mobile all those years ago, because T-Mobile, believe it or not, works better than AT&T in that building. Roof access ladders at the ECC, when that reno was done in 2016, we did not, and I wasn't doing this then, but in 2016 we did not put access ladders on the roofs, which puts our maintenance crews in peril, actually, as we're dragging extension ladders and step ladders up on roofs to change levels, and that's just not a safe thing. So we're going to add those. We've got some preschool playground subsurface preparation in preparation for the poured-in-place surfacing that, if memory serves, that will be coming from Head Start grant funding. And we've got some busted sprinkler heads over there that we need to repair. We're also looking, Dr. Dietrich and I haven't talked about this yet, we are looking at potentially adding a van to the fleet. Our vehicle fleet, with the exception of our buses, is aging and in need of, if not replacement, if not repair, replacement, at least for some of them. So that's something that we are going to be taking a careful look at too as we go. As we jump into some of these projects, this current year we started replacing the classroom chairs in this building for the middle school and high school. We haven't replaced these chairs since we've done the bulk of the renovation back in 2006, 2007, so it's well beyond time. As a matter of fact, that was becoming a safety issue as the chairs that we had would crack, they would pinch legs and grab hair, and it's not a great situation. The county is requiring us to add signage, safety signage to all of our buildings. So this is a cost to do that, along with our own wayfinding. It's very frustrating for our community as they enter our buildings. They can't find a restroom. So Mike, Dr. Dietrich is looking for ways that we can improve our wayfinding around the district. The grease trap is rotten in the kitchen here in this building. It's pretty much just a hole in the ground, dirt hole in the ground. I don't know how long that thing's been here, but it's well beyond its usable life, needs replaced. Unfortunately, that's expensive. Automated floor scrubber, this is also not a permanent thing right now. We're still talking about this, but this is a potential savings because overall, because it will free up bandwidth for our custodial crews to do other things while this thing is going. Think about a giant Roomba that does floor, not waxing, but mopping, scrubbing, extraction, that type of thing. We've got some areas down in the courtyard ceiling that need fixed, athletic storage shed, and our theater floor. The paint on the floor is coming up, and a number of areas is starting to look pretty shabby, actually. That was renovated back in 06, or 06 as well, and we've not touched that since then. However, as said earlier in the meeting, Dr. Dietrich will be bringing back a multi-year plan that will put a little bit more shape and may move some of these things that I've briefly outlined here from one year to another, just depending on where they fall on the priorities from our management oversight team and also the board committee related to goal 4 of our strategic plan. Oop.
Any other questions?
I think he has a couple more slides.
This is real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. I fumbled the transfer from slide to slide. So this is where we're looking right now. This does say operating. You'll notice this huge swing on the capital outlay. I thought since we're coming to the end of our large capital projects, meaning construction and renovation, I would go ahead and add that here just to illustrate that we are at the end of those projects. It would be really nice if we didn't have to budget any of those funds into the next year, those bond funds and the lease participation certificates. I do think that some of this will carry over into the next year, just as we're going through project closeout and such. Okay, sorry for the small numbers. I'm hoping you're looking at it on your own screen. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. But we are looking right now at about a 25.5% fund balance at the end, which would be still be down just a little over 10% where we're expecting to end this year. We still have a lot of work to do reviewing the budgets. I've spent a lot of time in position control, even today, making sure that we have everybody captured and everything captured for our staffing. Continuing to review and update those revenue budgets as I get better information. The May finance memo came out today, and it's going to cause me hours of work to move things around based on some changes the state is making to what is and is not a capital expense. So while frustrating, it's work that needs to be done. We'll get it done. And the annual budget book, that's also a lot of work, and we've pretty much got everything linked. We need to update the narratives to reflect this year's numbers. Now, what are your questions?
The projected expenditures that you showed in this presentation, are they reflected in the budget projections for the next couple years that you have here?
Yes.
Okay. So if we're looking at projected deficit of just shy of 2.6 million, next year 2.9 million, following year almost 3 million, then 3.5 million, and then our fund balance depletes to below zero. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what are the projected cuts that are being anticipated? We've seen some new expenditures. What are the projected cuts?
So I'll address that. So that item actually will be coming to the board. We are anticipating some additional revenue with the passing of Senate Bill 727. Chris and I talked about that earlier today, as well as some additional revenue. I think one of the questions that you asked was in regards to property and what expenses will be utilized for that. And so
I think that might have been somebody else's
was one of the board questions that was asked. So that information actually will be coming back to the board with a plan to address the current budget and the projected fund balance. And so I would ask that you give us time to do that, because currently the focus has been on developing this budget so that we can present to the board what we would hope to move forward in order to address the spend down.
Okay, so why propose a budget that would have deficit spending to this level? Why not try and look for something that comes out to zero?
As Mr. Hoser shared, he's still reviewing the budget, and then he and I will sit to actually look at department budgets. And so if you look at the majority of the budget, while these items are actually here, we still need to be able to operate the school district. So again, those items will be coming forward. This is what he's presenting as of today. And as we continue to work to review the budget to make adjustments, and adjustments have been made, they're just not noted here. They're noted from the original budgets that were submitted by departments and also building principals. And so adjustments have been made to address some of that, and we're still continuing to review those budgets. But based on the increases that were given from the staffing, which Mr. Hoser just explained, there is a intentional spend down. So with the 10% increase, 7% for the first year, 3% for the second, the 7% does not include the 2.75% increase. So that was very intentional, and with the information that was provided by the NEA in regards to where their focus will be next year, they will be asking for additional pay increases. So I recognize the need to look for cuts. We are doing that as we go through the budget, but I would ask that we be able to bring that information back as a collective so that you can see the larger picture in regards to what we're recommending to the board.
And is that the time when the board can make its own recommendations for cuts?
Typically, for cuts, those would be operational items, but I'd be more than happy to sit down with you and Mr. Hoser to talk about our approach for that. And so the board approves the budget, they do not create the budget, and that's outlined in the board's roles and responsibilities. And so we can discuss cuts where needed, but keeping in mind that the majority of our expenditures are in our people, And, I would be curious as to what cuts would one want to make, but we definitely are interested in hearing your perspective, but I would also ask that you allow members of our team to actually complete the work and bring forth the budget after we finalize. And so again, this is just an update to the board to see where we are now, and as Mr. Hoser shared, adjustments will be made.
That makes sense. What I would love it is if we could get a budget that has like what you think would be a good idea for next year, and one that gets us pretty close to zero. Like how drastic would the cuts have to be? So we have a sense of how much are we giving up, or how much is really at stake in getting to zero versus getting to something that's what you would like to see.
I'd say based on the questions that have been submitted to administration over the past two board meetings, some of the things that are being questioned in regards to like food expenditures and also purchase of t-shirts and things that are considered like community building activities, we very well can look at cutting those. But if we're talking about addressing climate and culture, and for example, an activity to be for staff to go bowling for team building, so I'm very interested in having those conversations, but we also recognize that those particular activities and things like that build a sense of belonging, and belonging is a core value. So again, I get it, but I'm asking if we be allowed to be able to finish the process here and bring that item back.
But could you come back to the board with something that shows what you would like to do, and then I'll just call it the drastic measure of getting down close to zero, just so we can see what the trade-offs are that the board is being asked to sign on to.
I would probably want to have some additional conversations so that I'm clear on the asks as I work with Mr. Hoser, and we can do that after the board meeting if that works for you.
As treasurer, I'd be delighted to sit and have that conversation.
Absolutely.
I think to your point, Brian, I think the greater point is that we clearly can't keep spending like this at this rate. So, and we can't, I mean, the only other option is to ask the citizens for more money, and so there has to be, I mean, people are already paying a lot. So I think we have some hard choices, like some hard conversations over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, because something's going to give here. So I do think it would be helpful to see sort of how we do that. If there's some
well, I'm going
just in
to,
general.
and I agree. I would say that going back to Dr. Ambrose Phillips' presentation around retention, we are losing candidates to surrounding districts when we're interviewing because we are not competitive. We are still second from the bottom with a very sizable increase. So I don't blame our teachers asking for additional funds. So I will continue to say it's a both and. We have to continue to develop culture and develop relationships, but we also have to pay them because they are working extremely hard in order to meet the needs of our students. So while we can cut certain things, and if the idea is to cut central office type staffs, I will say that many hands lighten the load, and I know the hours of the time that members of my team are putting in. And so we will continue to work to look at ways where we can trim the budget, but I do want to be mindful that as we talk about budget cuts, and if we're talking about food and t-shirts and the things that build community, that we may want to have a collective conversation and really think about what our teachers appreciate as we talk about value, and then also looking at ways where we can cut money. We have been very successful with acquiring a lot of grant funds. One in point where that was led by Dr. McGee of $400,000. So we're finding ways to offset some of the costs, but I'm asking again to have an opportunity to be able to work through, and we can bring something that would address some of that. So thank you for that consideration.
And I would like to add too, if you look at the trend from fiscal 23 through the projected fiscal 25, you see where the increases have happened. They haven't really happened on the purchase services and supplies end of our budget. So to Dr. Jameson's point, in order to become even closer to competitive, you see where we added the money to the budget. So if you look at just the delta between salaries from 23 to 25, we're looking at $2.5 million. There's your deficit right there.
Yeah, I didn't mention anything about t-shirts or anything like that, so I'm not sure where that's coming from. But the issue is salaries, yes. But if we're going to talk about t-shirts and things, the issue really is about just a general sort of disposition towards taxpayer resources and what's a wise use of taxpayer resources. But my concern is that if you go to the voters and they say no, then you still have the hard reality in front of you. And so I just wondering, can we at least entertain, even if it's just an academic conversation, what it looks like to be at zero? Can we see how drastic the situation needs to be? What cuts need to be made? Because the voters have given us $26.9 million maybe, and we just have to work within that number. And so what has to change on the expense side? That's all. That's what I'm asking, and I'm happy to have a conversation either one-on-one and then certainly at the board meeting in the future.
We'll be more than happy to bring something forward. Thank you for that.
I have a specific question. So on the expenditures projected page, and so for salaries, so what's the increase, the teacher's salary increase percentage for next year? Was it 2.75?
It's 3% plus a step.
Yeah, so the step increase is 2.75. We added 3% on top of that, so it's.
Okay, but then this is just because this is against all salaries?
Yeah, exactly right,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, the percentages get a little.
No, I mean, that's why I wanted to say.
Yeah, it's a good question, thank you.
But I think the other piece that we're also not considering is that as teachers either earn national board certification, advanced degrees, masters, that also impacts the budget. And so be more than happy to bring those items forward if we're encouraging staff to actually improve their practice, and we compensate them for that. So those are all things that we need to continue to consider. So, I recognize the dire nature, but I would also say that we value our teachers. They are our, outside of kids, our most prized commodity. And if we are not able to be competitive, and I agree, Jenny, that at some point we have to engage in that conversation with the community, but the NEA is clear right now. They are coming next year to ask for additional increases. And so if we want to keep the staff that we have, and we're talking about retention rates, we will have to strongly consider their ask. And so we will continue to work through that. We do value taxpayers' dollars, and so we're not frivolously spending. It would be an interesting analysis to look at prior to current administration, what expenditures have been spent on food and T-shirts in comparison to the current 3 years outside of the salary increases. So again, we will bring something forward. It may not necessarily meet the needs that you're requesting, but I am willing to entertain that activity alongside Mr. Holzer.
Well, just to speak up for the taxpayers also value the teachers, but they value them at $22.3 million and maybe not more. So, I mean, the taxpayers may just say, at some point, we do have to just say no to the teachers, and that may be what the taxpayers say. I mean, at some point, we have to answer to them if they're not willing to give us more. So I'm just saying, can we make what I'll call a contingency budget, that where we go to the voters and ask for an increase, and they say no, do we have a plan for that?
We are working.
We should plan.
We are working
Yeah.
through that, and that's what I was sharing.
Yeah, and I think historically, we have gone out about every 5 years to ask for, an increase. Obviously, we were able to hold off that because of the COVID, infusion of funds. If you pull out the COVID years, we're kind of trending where we would have trended, historically 5 years. And that is oftentimes the exercise that the board has engaged in the lead up, right? Because there will be someone who has to make the case to the community. You can support this and and maintain this level of service and get a little bit more, or you can not support this and this is what the existing budget would look like. So you may just be a few months ahead of where the historic process has been, but it's, yeah.
Historically, we have gone every 5. I was projecting 7. We've gotten 9. So as Katie mentioned, the COVID propped us up for about 2 years. So not only did we beat the 5-year trend, we've added 4 years to it, even with or without the pandemic. So we're in pretty good shape.
So,
in that regard.
As we're doing the comparisons of the budget, what would happen if we zero out?
The what-if budget.
Yeah, why don't we also do an estimate of like how much would have to be increased with taxes?
Right.
Let's do that too.
That too, yes.
Yeah, and again, I was actually going to ask Chris when we're going to get our first draft of the budget book, because I think that that's actually a more pressing issue than these academic exercises about things. I mean, it should closely follow, but, I will just say to you, we had some challenges with editing of the budget book last year, and I think the time crunch, and so as much time as we can have with the budget book this year, the better. While I recognize your tinkering with it up until the 11th hour, I would request that we have it by mid-June, if not, earlier, with the recognition that there may be things that need to change, or we will get more accurate information as the month progresses. But because of, again, just even some typo catching, at the 11th hour last year, and the amount of new eyes that will be on the budget this year as well, I think it would behoove us to have that draft earlier rather than later.
Because to clarify, I mean, I know you can go past, but will we be voting on it by the end of June? Yeah, so that,
Yes.
I mean, 2 weeks is not a lot of time for a 70-page document. I'm going to tell you, I'm out of town, people have summer vacations, so the sooner the better. Because I will have questions, I'm sure you're going to ask.
All right, does anybody have any other questions? All right, we're going to move on to item 6.01, Board of Education Committee reports.
I have one in there. It's actually old news now because it was the update from the the Legislative Advocacy Committee about SB 727, which the governor did sign. I think it is generally bad news for public education, although Dr. Jameson does mention that we maybe this year will get some extra money, but there's no guarantee that things like transportation fund or other things will be fully funded, even if the formula is fully funded. So continuing to watch and continuing to have concerns about taxpayers' money going to unregulated, unaccountable schools that play by different rules than we have to.
You have a question for her? No. So, we had a special SDD Governing Council meeting to talk and discuss and hear from the special school district on their FY25 budget and kind of the things that happened previous administration. So we were presented a binder, discussed it, and we come back on June 3rd to vote for their budget, but also each part of the school district got their budget. So I guess that's something, to Dr. Jameson to just review, and they will probably present on out, but that's just a quick thing. So we'll see on June 3rd if the budget get approved for special school district.
And I know it's not a committee, but there's nowhere else to really do it. I just wanted to report I attended the community conversations, and it's not videoed, so just for the benefit of the public. It was a wonderful presentation by Dr. Amber Phillips, and we talked about, child protection, and so there were staff members there, teachers, there were board members, and then there were community members, and so just a few highlights of what people came out of for ideas for how to help, for teacher retention, or was a safe space for teachers and staff to provide honest and authentic feedback, more time to prepare and plan, ensuring that when an administration is, sort of requiring some of that time, that it's, focused and relevant to the particular teacher's a pay plan, which I think is something good for us as we're talking about the budget, a 3-year, a 5-year, sort of what that would look like, that teachers were saying that would give them a lot of hope, right? To know that perhaps we're trying to plan out how we can increase that pay, and then autonomy was the last one. So I just wanted to give that update for those in the community who weren't able to attend. Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Calendar events, we actually have a lot of very exciting things that are coming up. Tomorrow, the MRH band will be at the Taste of Maplewood. And then again, Saturday, there's the Taste of Maplewood. On May 19th, Sunday, there's the senior parade, which is always a big hit. And as we go into next week, we've got the Future Freshman Fair, which is on May 22nd. And the district is going to So, and the big day, May 30th, which is graduation day. So that's exciting. And, oh, there's party for teachers. And I think there's an
I think that's a party.
It's, what is it?
No, very towards this.
Oh,
It's a work day.
Oh,
I mean,
sorry.
it's their last day, so
All right,
there
well-
will be a party after.
Right, we'll enjoy it. All right. And I think that's it. I think there's a need for a graduation.
There it is.
All right, so, right, if you care, you can.
Can I just give a, there's no placements, but I just want to give a shout out to our middle school 8th grade teachers for Jekyll Island. My child attended, and that is a magnificent experience. And all the adults who went, the parents, the teachers, the students, the upperclassmen who went, and women who went, I just am very appreciative of that. I know that is a lot of work. It is not easy to be around that many middle schoolers for that long, uninterrupted. And so I am just very thankful that our district prioritizes that experience. So I want to thank them.
Anybody else?
I just want to echo that for the Touch of Nature trip for the 7th graders, and I echo those remarks. My daughter went and had absolutely delightful time. The teachers did a great job helping kids connect with kids they didn't normally spend time with during the school year. I don't know if that was a strategic plan on their part, but they did a good job helping my daughter meet a number of other kids and spend time with them in intense ways that she hadn't before. That was great.
Sure, I'd love to shout out the ECC's Living Black History Museum last night. About 24 kids took on extra work to research a famous Black American and dress up like them and present. My child does not do those sorts of things, but we toured the museum and was very impressed with what Ms. Stansel and Ms. May and probably others who I'm not aware of helped make happen. So.
I guess, I don't know if anybody's noticed, there have been a lot of planting around the building that the kids have actually participated in. So I'd like to shout out to the teachers that made that possible. I know that that's one of the things that really makes our school special is, you know, the gardening, I guess.
It's Ms. Breed's parts, and Mr. Hensky actually did their work. I was able to observe, and they made sure I took pictures and put them on Twitter and Facebook, and I did.
Okay, all right, so now we're going to move on to our action items. So, can I get a motion to, and this is where we do a motion? Right, I know, but I guess my question is, do I ask for a motion and then you get a second, and then we discuss?
Then we discuss, that's correct.
Okay, all right,
So
can I
move
have
to
a motion
approve.
to approve the construction change order.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Well, now there's discussion.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, does anybody have a question? Okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. 7.02, SZD Resolution 2. Can I have a motion to approve as presented?
Move to adopt the SDZ Resolution 2 as presented.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. 7.03, symbol meeting management software. Can I get a motion to adopt?
Move to approve the purchase of Symboli as presented.
Second.
All in, or any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? No? All right, so then 7.04, budget amendment 2. Can I get a motion to approve as presented?
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Let's move forward. Okay, so now we've got a 7.04A, which is the assessment plan. So can I get a motion to approve the assessment plan as presented?
Motion to approve the assessment plan as presented.
Second.
Second.
All right, and I know there's some questions regarding.
Yeah, just, let me go back to my notes here.
So on the assessment plan, the budget impact, somebody updated it. It had said 70,000, now it says 55,000. I guess it was updated in the last day or so. What is the budget impact? That was the only piece that was missing from the report.
I'll have Rachel Ward to address those, and she did also answer all of the questions that were sent in the queries from the board, if you want to go back and review those as well.
Okay, can you repeat your question for me, please? The money?
Yeah, under the assessment plan, it lists a budget impact of this assessment plan is $55,000. And in the documents presented, it just didn't say what the $55,000 was for.
Yes, so I saw that comment and I updated it. So I did make an error when I went to my budgets and I hit filter and I saw all of them and I put that total there. And that was all the ones I had access to, and it included some virtual learning and some other accounts that weren't assessments. So when we filtered that out to just assessments that it's paying for that are in the assessment plan, it is $55,000 approximately. And there is a graph now on slide 4 that lists out which assessments cost the district what that are within that assessment plan.
And one of our largest expenses is our guaranteed AP exam.
Yeah, those are about $98 a piece, and we had 133 students that we registered for this year. Based on course registrations, we have 174, I believe, if that math adds up. But it was in the 170 range, which I was surprised and happy for, but it does increase costs.
And I'll just say the MRH is unique in that a lot of districts do not pay for the AP assessments for students, as having a graduating student in college who took them.
That was the one good thing that came out of Governor Greiten's tenure, was that he paid for the AP exam and then we continued it after that.
Wow, I didn't think Greiten's doing It says in the document that you will use high-quality academic assessments. I'm just wondering, but when you say high quality, what are the sort of criteria by which you're saying they're high quality? Is that because they're used universally, or they're used commonly, or is it because it's something that you decided?
So there's actually, in the board doc workbook, we provided some resources and some links to things for that, because it varies on the assessment and what the purpose of that assessment is. I think we gave some examples of some criteria we look at.
So you answered the question on the board docs.
On like a, I don't know what is that document? I don't.
The assessment plan?
It's actually questions.
Yeah, so she answered it on the, you might have
But this is for the public.
So I can read that for you. So again, as Ms. Ward was indicating, depending on the assessment, whether it's the state assessment, I think I linked in a resource for NWEA, which is the assessment that's used for 7 through 12. The things that are looked at is whether or not the assessment produces valid, reliable, consistent results, if the test is nationally normed, if it's aligned to Missouri learning standards, and then the criteria that's outlined by the state and federal law, and then if it generates meaningful and actionable insights, meaning that the assessments you're given, the data that's provided back provides a way for teachers to actually be able to modify their instruction to meet the individualized needs of students.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, and then I got the answer that we don't do 12th grade and NWEA because it's not, I can't remember the word.
Normed for the 12th grade, yeah.
Is there any way we can test it? But I guess it doesn't really matter because we can't compare them back to 11th grade, 10th grade.
So when we first purchased, we
used to do it though.
We did not. We purchased and we bought it.
That was just an error?
Yeah. Yeah, we bought it, it was a high school, so we just did 9 through 12, and then once we got into it, reading through it and looking at the norms table, it was like, oh, this doesn't make sense to have our seniors sit for 3 assessments that are not giving us data that is, so we actually took it out of the 23-24 assessment plan, so we haven't been doing it all year either, so.
Then the other thing is just about science education. I'm a little concerned about science education. I am a scientist, so I have a particular interest in it. You can see our science scores have dropped off as well. I just wonder why we aren't doing more to test people at 9 through 12.
Yeah, I mean, The assessments provided, benchmark test assessments that cover science are very limited. NWA does have one, but it does not align to the Missouri
Missouri standards
biology.
are very, very unusual.
Correct.
They're incredibly skewed towards biology. And
Yes.
They don't ask any questions about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it would be nice for us to know what our students are learning in terms of science.
Like life science, other sciences and
Chemistry,
threads, physics, all those
science
things.
in general.
I mean, that assessment does have a science component. It just did not align, so because we were using it as a benchmarking tool to help us with our state and federal, we did not think it aligned and did not go that route.
So-
But that is something we can.
Can I jump in?
Explore.
So we talk about over-assessing students, and so I would caution us to use an assessment that the data is not going to be something that they can actually use to tailor their teaching. But I think to answer your larger question in regards to what can we do to improve science instruction, I think the process that Dr. McGee outlined around looking at instructional resources. So there is a resource you have, MySci, so we can examine to see if the units that are being utilized are aligned and give us the results that we need. But that looks different for middle school and high school because they don't use MySci. So I think your question is a valid question, but I think it's not rooted in the assessment, because when you look at the standards, the assessments, and the other pieces, your assessment is going to actually, it's assessing what's been taught. And so if your resource is not aligned to the curriculum that you have, your assessment results will show something different. So it sounds like we need to also
Well, we
look.
have classes, we seem to have curriculum, we're just not assessing.
But we don't have resources. And so when you think about the resources, as Dr. McGee talked about, which we can talk about a little bit further, it's yes, we have curriculum, but if the standards and some of those pieces are not actually the ones that are being taught, because the standards change frequently, I think there's some pieces to that. So I would ask that that's an item that we bring forward. I don't think it's rooted in the assessment, though. They're teaching, the assessment is going to tell you whether or not what they taught using the curriculum and the resource is actually impacting student outcomes.
I mean, science education is fairly standard in the high school realm. It's just a matter of are people learning it?
Well, is the ACT being used since so many students are taking it? I assume that includes AP Bio, AP Chem. I don't know if there's an AP Physics exam that's offered, but are the teachers getting the results of those tests to understand, because that's kind of a teaching to the test sort of course.
You said AP? I think you started by saying ACT, but.
Oh, no, AP. Sorry.
AP, okay. The AP exams. Yes, so our teachers do get those results. I do not believe they get like standard, strand level, any of that. It's just scores that they get to know if their students got a 3. So you can't, I mean, you can teach to the test through the training and through knowing what's on that test, and but you can't see did our students all consistently perform at a certain level based on a specific standard or skill, and then change their instruction to do that.
It's a very small number of students taking AP.
Right. And can I also jump in real quick? So science background as well, so right there with you. The NWEA science assessment is a life science assessment, which means that it skews biology. When you line up the blueprint of the NWEA assessment that's available, it does not match the EOC. So it's a bad assessment for us in Missouri. It's not a bad assessment, it's just a bad assessment for us, because it doesn't have that predictive nature where we could monitor it and make meaningful results to what we're evaluated on, which is our end of course exam specifically for biology.
Yeah, I guess the difference is when the state of Missouri is evaluating basically on biology, great, fine. I'm more interested in evaluating science in general.
Sure.
Which is of interest to the students, which is what they're going to need as they go out in the world.
Yeah.
And when we prioritize things, we have to prioritize the things that we're actually going to be accountable to. And it's attention that we face, right?
I mean, I guess I don't understand why it's mutually exclusive though.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, that's, I mean, like, yes, we're just testing on one area. Great, we'll do well in that area that we test. That doesn't mean that we should be teaching everything. So, I mean, I'm sure that there's a way to do that.
There are unit assessments. I think going back to my, my original point, there are ways to actually collect the data that we're looking at. To your last question in regards to why aren't we assessing seniors, they're departing, and so it doesn't make sense to assess them if they're already completing, whether it's the ACT or other assessments within the assessment plan, because you really wouldn't be making adjustments and there's no alignment. So again, not saying that one is not interested in the questions that you're asking. I think that there's a piece that we also need to consider, which is whether or not the instructional resources that are being used are actually ensuring that students are mastering content, mastery of content.
So, all in favor of approving the assessment plan as presented?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we're moving on to 704B, which is the warrant list. Can I get a motion to approve the warrant list as presented?
Motion to approve the warrant list as presented.
Second.
I just had just a couple general, and I just want to start by saying, and I think as we get more familiar, I think probably as new ones are asking a lot of questions, and it's just started trying to become familiar, but I did notice in this warrant list that there were quite a few, I think these are invoice dates on the credit card, there were quite a few from like last July, August, September. Is that standard to have, I mean, it was like close to 100 that were unpaid, like that were being paid now?
And you'll see more. Those have already been paid. Those are direct debits to the bank. This is the recording of them in the general ledger so that they're reflected. So yeah, we've had significant churn in our buildings, in the realm of our offices, our secretarial staff. As a matter of fact, we've got a vacancy now. We just filled one at the ECC. We recently filled one within the last couple of months at the elementary. Unfortunately, that compounded with the short staff in the business office. Quite honestly, that processing is just behind.
Okay, so is the Visa card a credit card, or you're saying it's like a debit card?
It's,
That, I guess, so.
well, no, that's not what I meant. So it's an automatic withdrawal each month at the bank. So it's not a credit card. We don't do credit cards. It's a purchasing card that has a line, has a dollar amount limit to it, but it's not credit.
But I guess my question is, if the invoice is from July and we're paying it now.
We're not paying it now. We're reflecting the payment in our general ledger now. Yes.
Okay, so it's just catching up.
Yes, exactly.
Counting like the input with the.
Yes, ma'am.
That makes sense.
Yes.
That was all.
We got there.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
All in favor?
No, I have a follow-up question. Yeah, I'd submitted a few questions in advance, but what's the policy for paying expenses for which we have no receipt? There was one that had no receipt, and it was $1,100, $1,107. What do we do when we are asked to make a payment on no receipt?
So we did actually link that, and I know, your communication said you would not be able to go back to see the responses that we put in, but we did actually put the responses in the document regarding the procedure for that, but there is a form that is to be completed when the receipts are lost, and then that is attached, so when we actually work with the auditors, they have the rationale for that. I will give you an example. When I do my one-on-ones or I have events where we're out and I use the district credit card, while my assistant gave me a lovely bag, sometimes places like Starbucks, they don't print the receipts, and she literally has to go and call them, and they're probably not the best to give receipts back, and so in those cases, you actually complete the form saying that you lost the receipt.
Sure. So all my questions, I think a lot of our questions, even though we receive responses back on email, we're here for the public. So I'm asking questions again, so the public gets to hear the question and hear
These are, I think there is, though, a difference between the level of granular detail that is, operational, especially when folks are charging back to a budget that's been approved. Brian, I appreciate that you're being a good taxpayer steward, and that part of this is getting up to speed. Reviewing the number of questions, there is a lot of very minutia in the warrant list.
Oh, sure. But also keep in mind, there are members of the public that are reading this warrant list and are sending questions to me because they understood that I was elected treasurer, so they were like, please explain these items.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So I mean, if I could, I'd ask questions about almost every page, but I only submitted 3 questions.
Well, there were actually other board members submitted questions, and so there were a total of 58 for this particular agenda.
I'm not aware of any of the others. Yeah.
I shared the document, but what I would ask, so I have been having conversations so that community is aware with both Josh and Jenny in regards to how do we ensure that the questions that are being posed, that they are being made public. And so the information, if we're talking about transparency, we're providing responses, we're not hiding information, and I appreciate the questions. But to Katie's point, when we talk about governance versus policy and we begin to talk about some of the operational questions, I recognize that it's a catching up, but I'm wondering as we meet in our next meeting to try to identify a way to ensure that the questions that are being asked are made visible to the public so that they can see that your questions are being posed. And then I think as we also included in the entry into the responses, some of the presentations, for example, Dr. Dietrich's presentation was modified to incorporate some of the questions, as well as Rachel Ward. So we do take those questions and make those modifications in addition to Dr. McGee's presentation. So, we are being responsive to that, but I would say that if we're saying being good stewards and sitting in the superintendency seat, last questions were 65 hours at the daily rate of my team, and then we have over 45 hours of time being invested per our daily rate. Is that the best use of district resources when there are other projects that we're trying to complete? So, I understand the need to answer the questions. I am working with both Josh and Jenny to be transparent, to say where can we park these responses so that community can see them. So it's not that we don't want them to see it.
Correct.
I mean, I think that the problem, what we're trying to juggle here is we want to have a presentation where we're not wasting time with, oh, I'll get back to you, I'll get back to you, I'll get back to you. But at the same time, it's not tenable, the current format. Like, we can't keep providing a detailed response to questions. And again, it has nothing to do with the questions that are being asked. They're all excellent questions,
I only submitted 4 questions. I don't know about 65.
I was allowed to admit,
I don't know about 65. I submitted 4 about the warrant list.
About this, I guess, is just that, this is something we're going to have to discuss as far as, like, how much time, in advance should we do it? Like, what kind of questions or get to the heart of governance versus what are questions that are not part of governance? And it is such a gray area, and it's something that I think we all struggle with. But I think that the answer has got to be, I think probably the best policy is maybe we just ask questions at the meeting. If we don't get the answers, we could follow it up. And those follow-ups are then posted to board docs. That might be the best way to do it, because I think that that's going to save the administration a lot of time. But if there are other suggestions, obviously, we can talk about it. But I think that, just for the purposes of this meeting, just recognizing that we have to figure out a way to make sure that people know we have questions, and that, if a community member has a question for a board member, that board member is actually asking the question and they are getting the answer, and vice versa. So I'm sorry.
No, I interrupted you, so I'm sorry. No, I think clarity is around, like, not necessarily like governance versus operational. I think we have a right to understand and know all the information. It's like what is appropriate in a meeting. And I guess for me, I think some of that has to do with onboarding, and I think we have not received any other than a talk with the lawyer. And so I know finance comes later, but it's the first major thing we do. And so for me, I think probably what would be helpful for Brian Trent and I is if we could have a couple hours with Mr. Holzer and say, hey, what does this code mean? What's in this section? Whatever, which would eliminate a lot of the minutia of the questions we're asking, because we're just trying to learn, and we are required to vote on this stuff. And for the taxpayer, so I'm not going to vote on something that I don't know what it is. So I apologize if I ask a lot of questions, but like that's the reality. I am shocked if it took 45 hours to answer those questions.
There was a lot of, no, I mean,
that's a lot of time.
The reason that it took so much time is because, again, they're trying to provide a detailed answer so that this will be, I mean, all of this stuff is going to be posted. so that people have not just see, meeting, whatever, and so, I mean, again, it's just a balancing act, and I think that the way we move forward, again, the questions are not the issue, it's just the timing of the questions is kind of an issue, and I know we've kind of discussed this a little bit, but a day before, for a lot of questions, it's just not enough time to have. And again, like, look, I mean, I'm not trying to cast blame here or say that, oh, you shouldn't ask questions. It's just that how it is working now, obviously, we've had it expressed by our administration that is an exorbitant amount of time to spend on it. So we have to find a better way to do it. We have to find a more efficient way to make sure that everybody's getting the answers they need, that everybody understands that, not just that we're getting the answers, but that the community is getting the answers too. And I mean, we'll figure it out, but not tonight.
And I think the point to me is he received over 200 pages worth of documents that we had to review, and so 1 week, less than a week is not a lot of time. So for me, I'm trying to get through those things as fast as I can. But it is, like, we all have full-time jobs, we all have children, we all have other things. So, like, I'm following a policy, like, this wasn't a policy I've ever had to engage in where I was supposed to turn in questions ahead of time, right? And I make a very strong effort to try to ask questions pertinent to what's being presented, and I would expect anyone presenting it could answer them because that's what the presentation is. So I think part of the problem is this policy of, like, you have to turn your questions in ahead of time.
It's that, no, it's not you have to turn your questions in ahead of time. It's merely like the respect of giving a heads up, and maybe it's the responding in advance that is the problem, right?
And I think it is because it's this, because Brian didn't, and then, at the last meeting, he was reprimanded for not turning in questions, right?
No, he
wasn't. So I think that we do need to, this is probably something, since it wasn't on the agenda, we put on an agenda item and we discuss it at a future date, but it's not working, you're right, it's not working.
So we'll figure it out, we'll put it on a work session.
And then, like Kate says, out of respect, because some question you guys are asking, especially to Chris, that's data from years ago. None of us gonna remember data from years ago. So he has to be prepared to bring that and present it, just like with Dr. Dietrich and everyone else. It's just respect, because we do ask some questions where they do have to go back and look for it.
Oh, for sure. I wouldn't ask a question like that.
I mean, some questions aren't being asked, so it's just out of respect.
Right.
So you would be prepared, because like I said, the public is watching. We want to make sure that everything is being provided to them. And then as you guys are working it out, how can we have it out there so when board members do ask the question, the public can just go out there and see it. And if there's more questions, of course, reach out to the board member or, come and do the public speaking, and it's just, but I think it's a good idea that you all meet with Chris, because I had the opportunity to sit with Chris one-on-one and that helped me out a lot.
Very helpful.
And that's something I asked for.
So I will just kind of clarify that there is board onboarding, and it's actually on a timeline so that the new board members do not feel as if they are sucking from a water hose. And so there's months 0 to 1, which topics have been introduced, and then there's months 1 to 3. And we are trying to work with the 3 collectively, so to ensure that everyone can come to participate. So we did have that conversation during our last cabinet meeting to say, do we want to do one-offs or do we want to collectively bring everyone forward? But each new board member was provided what that scope looked like. So I just want to be clear to community when we say that there is no board onboarding, there is very extensive board onboarding, and it is a new process that was not in place prior to the tenure of many members of this team.
To clarify, I did not say there was no onboarding. I said finance comes in month 9, and I think perhaps for us, it would be helpful to move that onboarding up because we have so many questions about finance. So that was my point. That is what I actually
and I think that, again, this is something that we can adjust, in a work session to make it work for everybody. I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, no, please.
Well, I was just going to say that, I think that we can figure out what our needs are. I mean, we're not beholden to this schedule. If it works better for our new members, then we'll do what works best for them. All right.
Thank you.
Well, seeing as how questions that were submitted will be made available to the public, I'd be willing to call to question on the warrant list.
All right. Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, all opposed? All right, perfect, pass. All right, so can somebody please provide a motion to bring us into executive session?
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on May 16th, 2024 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters.
All in favor?
Yes, we have to do a roll.
We have a roll call.
Mr. Colbert?
Aye.
Mr. Matz?
Aye.
Ms. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt? Yes. Mr. Miller?
Yes. All right, meeting adjourned. Be nice to meet y'all for a minute.
Thank you.